Chapter 898. Wyrm dragged the blackened world of Warcraft Eulydium with one hand. When he walked out of the smoke, Wyrm threw Eulydium heavily. Thump! There was a loud noise, and dust flew everywhere. With Wyrm's strength and Eulydium's body weight, a huge crater was created on the ground. As expected of our British silver dragon Vero. Speaking of which, is he dead? Merlin jumped down from the high ground and walked unhurriedly to the large piece of mixed black flesh. Although I think it should be dead after taking that hit, it's a pity. Wyrm shook his head. This guy was still alive. It could only be said that it was worthy of being the original demon born from Tiamat. Its body was so strong that it was able to survive such an attack. Wyrm's attack just now was multiple super-level magic, and this guy was still alive. Even if it was a servant, it would not survive such an attack, unless it had a special skill or a special noble artifact. But those mass-produced Eulydium should be dead. If multiple super-level magic couldn't even kill a mass-produced Eulydium, then it would be too cheap. It's not hard to understand why this guy is still alive. This is the so-called prototype. According to King Gilgamesh and my judgment, they are indeed Tiamat's the 11 sons. Merlin poked Eulydium with his staff and told Wyrm his information. I've fought with it before, so I'm pretty sure of this. Then, Wyrm walked to Eulydium's head and created a weapon with a high-grade item. He was ready to pierce Eulydium's brain through its eyes and kill it completely. Why did you abandon your mission and come to me? The reason Merlin appeared in this place must be because he had a mission. Otherwise, why would a court magician like him come to this border? While Wyrm was talking, Eulydium's body shook a little. It was the desire to live. Wait. If it's not dead, don't kill it. Merlin grabbed Wyrm's hand and quickly stopped Wyrm's action, saving Eulydium, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Eulydium, who was still conscious, heaved a sigh of relief. Thanks to the mother goddess, Eulydium could breathe more air between heaven and earth. It felt like he was in the embrace of the mother goddess. It's Tiamat's son, and it's an existence that can be communicated with. It's a pity to kill it. In other words, Merlin wanted to take Eulydium as a prisoner to obtain information? Let me say this first. I don't think you can get any useful information. Wyrm knew what Merlin wanted to do. It was nothing more than to use an illusion to obtain information. However, Wyrm didn't think highly of Merlin, or rather, he didn't think highly of the magical beast. Wyrm didn't think that this magical beast had any information in its head. The plan of the magical beasts was nothing more than to attack the humans. As the saying goes, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Silent Wonder wasn't exaggerating. Since Silent Wonder had returned, he wasn't afraid of not being able to stop the attack of the magical beasts, even if it was a strengthened version of the magical beasts. No Villo. A lot has happened in the 6 months you left Uruk. The magical beasts have undergone earth-shattering changes, and they have caused a very serious impact on this world. At that moment, Merlin didn't care about Eulydium's presence. He told Wyrm some things. Half a year ago, 11 magical beast commanders who called themselves the 11 sons of Tiamat appeared. In order to eliminate the magical beast commanders, a magical beast commander attacked the Uruk and killed all his servants. The Sage King summoned new servants and established new defense systems in the sky, rivers, lakes, underground, and so on. Although it was just a general description and didn't explain the details, if the audience was Wyrm, they would definitely understand. Don't think that it's easy for you to defeat Eulydium. This is a magical beast comparable to a god-level servant. Wyrm was also aware of this fact. Previously, Eulydium had used only his body to resist the multiple supreme-level spells he had cast. Although Eulydium was already half-dead, the fact that he could withstand multiple supreme-level spells without dying was enough to prove his strength as a demon commander. Moreover, the servants summoned by King Gilgamesh basically killed a few magical beast commanders at the cost of 2 to 1 or even 3 to 1. That was why Gilgamesh chose to summon new servants. After all, there was a shortage of manpower. It seemed that the Uruk side was able to eliminate the magical beast commander that attacked the Uruk in a suicidal manner. It could be said that they took a big advantage. However, Wyrm said this. I really didn't mean to underestimate the magical beast commander. He didn't underestimate the magical beast commander. This made Merlin feel very helpless, so Merlin continued to explain. Since the magical beast commander has good wisdom, then we can't treat the magical beasts as beasts. Merlin's implication was that they must treat the other side as a country where soldiers are magical beasts. Since they could capture one of the generals alive, naturally, they couldn't kill it easily. They had to squeeze out the last bit of value before killing it. If this kobold Eulidium knew about this, he would definitely call Merlin a monster. Anyway, I didn't mean to refute you. You can do whatever you want. Shrugging his shoulders, Wyrm walked to the side and removed the weapon in his hand. The weapon turned into blue magic particles and dissipated. Yes, you've helped me a lot, Merlin nodded with a smile, then walked to the front of Eulidium, who had lost the ability to resist. Then he gently tapped Eulidium's head with his staff. All right, Eulidium of Warcraft, relax. I'll be gentle. I'll take care of you like a dream. Chapter 899. The magical beasts are preparing to attack the north wall and destroy it in one fell swoop. Is that so? Wyrm replied to Merlin unhappily. After all, this didn't seem to be any important information. Not only that, the magical beasts are also preparing to launch a fierce feint attack on humans from the mountains in the northeast, the Persian Gulf in the southeast, and the highlands in the southwest. Depending on the conditions, they will turn the feint attack into their main force. If that's the case, we will be in danger. The strengthened magical beasts posed a great threat to humans. If 2 or 3 people could barely deal with an ordinary magical beast in the past, now it would take nearly 10 people to deal with an ordinary magical beast. Moreover, if it weren't for King Gilgamesh calmly issuing new defense regulations and strengthening the defenses of the North Wall, and even other areas, the Uruk wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than half a year. But even so, the North Wall could only barely hold on. It wouldn't be surprising if it was broken through at any time. And if the number of magical beasts was large enough to besiege the Uruk from all directions, the humans in Mesopotamia would be completely finished. Merlin told Wyrm about this analysis, and also some details about the magical beasts, reminding Wyrm not to underestimate them. I see, it's already that serious. At this moment, Wyrm had a thorough understanding of the current situation. Wyrm even wondered if Gydia had made some changes to the last singularity. Then, Wyrm realized a problem. Speaking of which, does the commander of the magical beasts want to break the agreement of the 3 goddesses and include the Quetzalcoatl in the attack? Or has the fact that the Quetzalcoatl changed sides been exposed? The mountains in the southwest were adjacent to the forest of the Quetzalcoatl. Even if they went around the edge of the Uruk, they would still be considered to have stepped into the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. However, if they did so, they would be considered to have crossed the border. Therefore, if they wanted to cross the border and attack the Uruk from the southwest, they would have to face the wrath of the Quetzalcoatl. Although the commander of the beasts was at the level of a deity, the Quetzalcoatl was still one of the 3 goddesses in the alliance, an existence equal to Gorgon. Since they were intelligent, they wouldn't do something so ridiculous. Because the goddess of the underworld is unable to leave the underworld, the magical beast commanders haven't had any designs on her for the time being. I don't know whether the feathered god has been exposed or not, but from Eulidium's memories, the feathered god has indeed been included in their list of targets to be destroyed along with the humans. Through Eulidium's memories, Merlin knew that there would be a new magic beast commander coming to support Eulidium, preparing to annihilate the humans along with the feathered god. As for whether or not the feathered god's betrayal of the 3 goddesses' alliance was exposed, Merlin had no way of knowing. If the feathered god has to face more than 3 magical beast commanders, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the feathered god to deal with them, Merlin judged. The Quetzalcoatl that appeared in this world was only a servant. Even if it was a servant at the level of a god, it was still a clone. When facing the 11 sons of Tiamat, it was inevitable that it would not be able to do much. It's better not to underestimate the feathered god. Wyrm did not think that the feathered god, as the main deity of South America, would be weak. Although Wyrm used Enkidu to capture the feathered god at that time, if the feathered god had refused, the result would have been unpredictable. The most important thing was that the feathered god's heart was with the humans. Wuming only told the feathered god the fact that there is still hope for the humans. So the feathered god finally chose to compromise. King Gilgamesh also has great expectations for the feathered god. After the feathered god defected to our side, Gilgamesh let the feathered god expand the scope of the jungle, including the entire south and southwest into the feathered god's jungle. This is to guard against the magical beasts that try to bypass the north wall from the southwest plateau. Letting the feathered god guard the southwest was part of Gilgamesh's defense plan. However, it's better to be cautious. The servants on the human side dared to gamble, but the humans could not afford to gamble at the moment. If they failed, it was likely that they would lose everything. I'll go back to Uruk first and see the king. The current situation was not something that Wuming and Merlin could decide. They had to discuss it with Gilgamesh. By the way, why did you come to the remote border? Merlin didn't answer this question from the beginning. If it wasn't for the fact that Wuming was going to Uruk to find Gilgamesh, he almost forgot to ask Merlin the purpose of coming here. Actually, I accompanied the people of Chaldea to support the feathered god. When Merlin said that, Wuming's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Tachika and the others have arrived. They just arrived in Uruk not long ago. After being trained by King Gilgamesh, they began to carry out the king's first order. And that order was to support the jungle in the south. Sure enough, the speed of time passing is not the same. Wuming said to himself for a while. The speed of time passing was not the same. Wuming already knew that, so Wuming didn't make a fuss about it. If that's the case, then I won't go to Uruk for now. No matter what, he had to meet Gadatsi and the others first. Gah! At this moment, a small pterosaur descended from the sky and came to Merlin's side. Oh, is this news from King Gilgamesh? Merlin untied the clay tablet fixed on the small pterosaur's back and handed it to Wuming. It must be related to you. You can take a look first. Indeed, as Merlin guessed, the clay tablet said that Merlin and Chaldea were to find Wuming and meet up with him. And they were to follow Wuming's instructions in the following operation. It's just for you to meet up with me. Wuming didn't read it out loud. After reading it, he crushed the clay tablet. Hey, I haven't read it yet. If King Gilgamesh knows about this, he will definitely blame me. Merlin looked like he was going to suffer. Don't I know you? Your skin is thicker than Chaldea. Wuming's implication was that Gilgamesh's scolding would not affect Merlin, and Merlin would still eat and drink as usual. As expected of my best friend Vilo, you really understand me, Merlin laughed shamelessly. Let's go find Tachika and the others. Ignoring Merlin, Wuming stepped forward and walked in the direction of the jungle. Not good. Merlin's sudden shout made Wuming turn around helplessly. What's wrong? Because I fell behind halfway. I'm not sure where the destination is, sorry. Merlin had an apologetic expression, but no matter how Wuming looked at it, Merlin's face was full of annoyance. If I'm not mistaken, it's Eridu. I've been there before, follow me. Thank you so much. As expected of my best friend. Accompanied by Merlin's strange laughter, the two entered the jungle from the opposite direction. Chapter 900. Oh, so this is Eridu. Sure enough, due to the influence of the jungle, everywhere looks like a primeval forest. Merlin, who had followed Wuming to Eridu, exclaimed in surprise. If it's as you said, then the leopard man has already brought Tachika and the others here. They're most likely here. Wuming walked into Eric Metropolis. The people who were working hard to make a living were shocked when they saw Wuming. It's Hyenryong-sama? Hyenryong-sama? Hyenryong-sama has come to Eridu. But I heard that Hyenryong-sama sacrificed himself to fight the demonic beasts. You idiot! Hyenryong-sama is such a powerful person. How could he sacrifice himself for something like that? I told you that's just a rumor. Hyenryong-sama is standing right in front of us. Hyenryong-sama. Ignoring some of the comments, the people of Eridu knelt down and started praying and cheering for Wuming. Wuming didn't stop the people from praying and cheering. Or rather, he couldn't stop them at all. This was the end of the gods' era, but the end of the gods' era was still in the gods' era. Stopping the people from praying, supporting, and cheering for the gods was the same as killing them. Therefore, Wuming didn't try to stop them. After all, everything had to be done step by step. Even if the gods' era was about to disappear, it was still the same. Wuming nodded at the people who were praying and cheering. He quickly left the place where the people were praying and headed towards the feathered serpent god's temple. "You're so popular here," Merlin, who had also caught up with them, said in surprise as he walked beside Wuming. Although Wuming was well liked in Mesopotamia as a Hyenryong, the humans in Idu treated Wuming a little too well. After all, I was the one who pulled the Quetzalcoatl into the alliance. Only then did the Quetzalcoatl promise not to terrorize Eric Metropolis and UR. They must be very grateful to me for that. Wuming did not think much of it. However, it was precisely because the Quetzalcoatl was no longer terrorizing them that Gilgamesh was relieved to let the Quetzalcoatl manage the southern cities temporarily. Ah! In that case, the feathered serpent god will become your stepping stone. Wuming only smiled at Merlin's debauchery. Be careful, the feathered serpent god might hear you and give you a wrestling combo. At that moment, Merlin put away his smile and became serious, which was rare for him. However, it was not because Merlin was afraid of the feathered serpent god's wrestling combo, but because Gudatzi and the others appeared. "Assassin, Senior Villo?" Gudatzi and Mashu looked at Wuming in surprise. They fell into a state of shock. "Long time no see, Tachika Matthew." After leaving the residential area of Idu, Wuming, Merlin, Gudatzi, and Matthew went to the special house that the leopard man prepared in advance for Gudatzi and the others near the temple of the feathered serpent god. They sat around a stone square table. Originally, Gudatzi and Matthew were resting here, but the people working near the temple bustled toward the city center. And while running, they said, "Hyenryong-sama is here." After that, the two, who were not familiar with Hyenryong, learned from Roman that Hyenryong was the most mysterious and powerful god among the Sumer gods. Hyenryong should also be a servant. I detected a very dense mana source here, which is probably emitted by Hyenryong. According to my judgment, Hyenryong is probably one of us. The two, who were a little interested in Hyenryong, and Roman proposed to meet this one of us. So Gudatzi and Matthew went out of the house to see what Hyenryong looked like. As a result, they didn't see Hyenryong, but they saw an acquaintance. At this moment, Gudatzi, who was in a good mood, took the initiative to ask a question, regardless of whether Hyenryong was Hyenryong or not. "Assassin, did you come here to help us? How did you come to this singularity?" Matthew was also quite curious about this. The Winterwood singularity aside, the American singularity appeared because of Queen Maeve who held the Holy Grail. And Wuming could appear in the Middle East singularity probably because he should be the same as Bedivere. At this moment, the Villo Senior, who could appear in the Mesopotamia singularity in BC, made Matthew quite curious. "It's normal that you don't know." Wuming didn't tell the two about his other identity, and when they met just now, Wuming had left the city center, and there were no citizens praying around him. Gudatzi and Matthew didn't know the identity of Wuming and Hyenryong. Actually, before Wuming could say anything, Merlin rushed to answer. "He's a local, it's normal for him to appear here." And Merlin, who rushed to answer, was still playing dumb and keeping them in suspense. "Mr. Merlin, what does this mean?" Matthew was quite puzzled. Not only Matthew, but Gudatzi was also puzzled. Then Gudatzi looked at her bracelet. "Doctor, do you know what Merlin means?" However, Roman, who was in Chaldea, didn't answer. "Doctor? Doctor?" Mashu also shouted a few words. "Is he asleep?" Gudatzi guessed. Yes, this is the almighty Leonardo da Vinci." Dr. Roman found it difficult to accept the reality and went to make coffee. "Let this genius answer your doubts." Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from the bracelet instead of Roman. According to the test, the magic source that was suspected to be Hyenryong was actually emitted by the Villo. In other words, Dr. Roman's judgment was wrong. Gudatzi and Matthew didn't think there was a problem. However, Wuming, who saw this scene, smiled helplessly. These two little cuties were so natural that they didn't realize the real problem. Merlin, too, burst out laughing at this. "What's the problem?" Gudatzi was even more puzzled. She felt that what the others were discussing was not the same as what she and Matthew were discussing. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci told Matthew and Gadazzi the correct answer. Tachika, Matthew, it's not that Roman's judgment was wrong, it's because the Villo is Hyenryong. Leonardo da Vinci shut his mouth. Wuming shook his head helplessly, and Merlin also stopped laughing. The whole room was replaced by silence. In other words, the Villo is the mysterious Uruk Hyenryong. Dr. Roman, who came back from making coffee, said in shock. Hey. It could be said that Gadazzi and Matthew finally experienced the feeling when Dr. Roman's mentality exploded. It was worth celebrating. Chapter 901. I'm sorry, I'm really a Uruk Hyenryong. I'm really sorry that I didn't tell you before, Wuming said apologetically. However, Wuming couldn't be blamed. It wasn't something worth bragging about. After interacting with Gadazzi and the rest for a while, Wuming had subconsciously forgotten that they didn't know about his other identities. Wuming had fully proved this point in the American and Middle Eastern singularities. Hyenryong is the most mysterious existence in the Sumer pantheon. He is so mysterious that his real name hasn't been passed down. Only Hyenryong, which is similar to a title, exists. This has led to a lot of rumors about Hyenryong's real name. There are even rumors that Hyenryong is the son of Tiamat, Ramu. Roman, who had returned to his seat, began to explain to everyone the information about Hyenryong recorded in Chaldea. Personally, I don't agree that Hyenryong is the magical beast Rama born by Tiamat, but I'm more inclined to believe that Hyenryong is the son of Tiamat. Roman's voice kept coming from Gadazzi's bracelet. Gadazzi, Matthew, and even Merlin, as well as a petite girl whose face was covered by a hood, all listened silently as if they were listening to a story. According to the records of mythology, Hyenryong was once feared and respected by powerful gods such as Godin, wind god Enlil, and water god Enki. Because Hyenryong's shrine was located in Uruk, even the position of the Uruk city god was occupied by Hyenryong during the late period of the god's era. Wuming, who was listening by the side, had a strange and awkward feeling. Moreover, these sayings were definitely made up by later generations. He had clearly left before Gilgamesh found the elixir of immortality, and he had no intention of competing with Ishtar for the position of the Uruk city god. Many people think that Hyenryong was treated so politely by the gods because of his noble birth. Only the son of Tiamat could be respected by Godin. In addition, Hyenryong did not pass down his real name. Therefore, some people think that Hyenryong's true form should be Tiamat's son, Ramu. But doctor, I remember that there are two Ramu, right? Matthew had doubts about this. Indeed, as Matthew said, there are two existences named Ramu in Mesopotamia. One is Ramu, who was also the son of Tiamat, and gave birth to Godin and wind god Enlil. The other is Ramu, one of the 11 magical beasts that Tiamat gave birth to. However, these are just rumors and the credibility is not high. Looking at Gadazzi and Matthew nodding like students in class, Wuming felt more than a little embarrassed. Not only were they rumors, but they were also completely fabricated by the later generations. Wuming did not interrupt Roman's scientific explanation. He just kept complaining in his heart. Although it is unknown when Hyenryong appeared in the eyes of the people, the period when Hyenryong faded from the eyes of the people was the period when King Gilgamesh was in power. That was the period when the gods gradually disappeared, and the era of the gods gradually declined. According to the records, Hyenryong personally destroyed his own temple, hoping that humans would walk the path of breaking away from the gods. Although there were gods who agreed to the separation of humans and gods, their intentions were not strong. Hyenryong could be said to be the only god who took the initiative to strongly advocate for the separation of humans and gods. Wuming nodded silently. Although there was some content in this statement that was fabricated by the later generations, it was generally not much different from Wuming's thoughts. Wuming, who was an outsider, was included in the Sumer divine system. But even so, he was still not a god of Mesopotamia. Wuming, who had strong modern thinking, naturally advocated the separation of humans and gods. Therefore, although Hyenryong was revered by the other gods, there were not many who interacted with him. Hyenryong spent more time with humans, especially the hero king Gilgamesh. It was said that Gilgamesh was taken care of by Hyenryong when he was young. The relationship between the two could be said that Hyenryong was Gilgamesh's adoptive father. Wuming took care of the female Gilgamesh in the parallel world. Although that was the case, after the adjustment of the suppression force, as long as it was a world with the shape of the moon, regardless of whether it was a parallel world or not, there would be myths related to Hyenryong in Mesopotamia. Logically speaking, before Wuming came to this singularity, he had no contact with this male Gilgamesh. But whenever Wuming communicated with him, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had really taken care of this singularity before. Senior Vilo is actually King Gilgamesh's adoptive father? Matthew, who understood this, was quite surprised. As for why he was surprised, he was naturally surprised by the sense of strangeness in it. The great silver dragon of Britain, the first knight of the Round Table, was actually the adoptive father of the most ancient hero King Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia. How could it not be strange? Roman also sighed helplessly. The legend of Vilo Saransword, a knight of the Round Table, is that of a dragon who transformed into a human. Now it seems that this is not a legend but a fact. Probably Hyenryong went to ancient Britain after leaving Mesopotamia. This was the only explanation at present. Why don't we ask Assassin? Isn't he right in front of us? Gadotsi looked curiously at Wuming, who was sitting in the most inconspicuous position. Since the person involved was present, why not just ask him? Matthew and Roman, who was now in Chaldea, were both stunned. Because of Wuming's silence at the beginning, coupled with Roman's extensive scientific knowledge, Matthew and Roman had subconsciously forgotten that the person involved was present at the scene. It seems that is indeed the case. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Yes. Why didn't I think of it? Damn it. Roman's deafening voice made Gadotsi subconsciously move her arm away. Great, it's good that the person involved is present. I really don't understand why the Uruk Hyenryong is a knight of the Round Table Vilo. Sumer turned out to be a knight of the Round Table. This is so strange. Is it really okay for you to be so agitated? Wuming silently complained. You'll die of overwork if you're too conflicted, Roman. Wuming even heard Leonardo da Vinci's nonsensical teasing. How can it be so easy to die of overwork? If it was so easy, I don't know how many times I would have died of overwork. Ignoring the mutual teasing of the Chaldea duo, Matthew looked at Wuming with great seriousness. Senior Vilo, what is the truth? Matthew's small eyes sparkled with interest. Ahem. Matthew, you have to know that the reason why mystery is because of its uncertainty and, most importantly, confidentiality. Chapter 902. Wuming coughed and pretended to be serious, which made Matthew sit up straight. Yes, I'm sorry, Vilo-senpai, I've offended you. After all, the world of magic was all about concealment and mystery. It was likely that if the truth was exposed, it would have a certain impact on the Vilo-senpai. Matthew thoughtfully made up an excuse for Wuming. Only Merlin looked like he wanted to laugh but didn't dare. It seemed that Merlin knew everything. Wuming looked at Merlin as if he was looking at a dead man, as if to say, if you dare to laugh or expose my information, I'll kill you. Anyway, let's talk about my problem later. Speaking of which, where did the feathered serpent god go? And where's the leopard man who brought you here? I don't see him either. We haven't seen the feathered serpent god. Maybe he's not here. As for Miss Leopard Man, Matthew looked cautious, so he was definitely not sure. After the leopard rested for a while, he roared and ran into the forest. The one who spoke was Miss Anna, whose face couldn't be seen clearly. Miss Anna, I'm sorry, I didn't notice you coming. Matthew was startled by Anna's voice, and he apologized guiltily. It's okay. It seemed that Anna didn't mind it very much. Assassin, let me introduce you. This is Anna, the Anna we met in Winterwood City, but she doesn't remember us. When we met Merlin, Anna was with Merlin. Yo Anna, long time no see. Wuming greeted her as if they were old friends. Anna nodded silently to the powerful existence who had protected her master, Sakura Madu. Is this singularity Anna the one in Winterwood? It seemed that Gadotsi had thought of Anna as the Anna in Winterwood City from the very beginning. Of course it's Anna. It's not difficult to understand why Anna can appear in this singularity. Firstly, the goddess of magical beasts of the three goddesses alliance was Gorgon, who wielded Tiamat's authority. Secondly, the master of Anna in the Winterwood singularity, Sakura Madu, was sealed in the Holy Grail that Wuming had given to the fake Enkidu. It's not impossible for Anna's master to appear in this world. However, this was difficult for Gadatsi and Matthew to comprehend. After all, they did not have enough information. But Miss Anna acted as if she didn't know us at all. She didn't talk to us at all. Matthew said weakly. I just hate humans. I didn't mean to avoid talking to you, Anna suddenly interrupted, although her explanation was full of contradictions. By the way, you should know Anna's real name, right? Gadatsi and Matthew exchanged glances and nodded. As expected, Miss Anna is Medusa. Back in Winterwood City, Gadatsi and the others did not interact much with Anna, so they did not get her real name from Anna. However, based on their encounter with Stheno and U'Reilly in Winterwood City, as well as the way the twin goddesses addressed and treated Anna, Roman guessed Anna's real name through future analysis. At this moment, Anna, who was called by her real name, did not show any emotion. It was as if she was not interested in anything. Do you know that the goddess of magical beasts is Gorgon, who wields Tiamat's authority? Huh. Matthew's exclamation told Wuming that she was indeed unaware of this. Indeed. Although we have some information, it's only a little. Part of the information about the goddess of magical beasts was heard from the civilians, Gadatsi added. Although many people knew that the goddess of magical beasts was Gorgon, the civilians did not have a deep understanding of it. Whether it was Tiamat or the outer gods who wielded Tiamat's authority, as long as it was a goddess who could produce magical beasts, it was Tiamat to them. At most, it was Tiamat who changed her appearance. In short, it was true that the magical beasts that attacked them were produced by the mother goddess. It seems that Merlin hasn't told you yet. With a sigh, Wuming looked at Merlin. Gadatsi and the others were unlikely to get information from Gilgamesh. After all, he was the most ancient hero king who approached Gadatsi and the others as soon as he came up and immediately arranged for them to undergo training in the Uruk after confirming that they were unqualified. However, if it was Merlin, he should have known about this piece of information. Ahahaha, because King Gilgamesh told me not to disclose any information to Chaldea and the others who were training in the Uruk, I completely forgot about it over time. Merlin laughed and scratched the back of his head proudly. In short, let's analyze the current situation now. The scientific meeting immediately turned into an intelligence meeting, and Roman also abdicated his position and stopped talking. The three goddesses alliance is the goddess of the underworld in Mesopotamia, the Quetzalcoatl in Central and South America, and the Greek goddess of monsters Gorgon, who holds Tiamat's authority. Gadatsi and Mashu nodded. They were not surprised. It seemed that this was part of the information they had. The Quetzalcoatl was betrayed by me, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the ground. The biggest threat is the goddess of monsters, Gorgon, who holds Tiamat's authority. In the face of this biggest threat, my last spiritual base attempted to perish together with Gorgon's spiritual base, but unfortunately, the fake Enkidu came and stopped it. However, Wuming was more concerned about the fact that Gorgon, who was seriously injured at that time, recovered slowly and effectively. Was it the influence of Tiamat's authority, or something else? While Wuming paused to think, Matthew raised his small hand and began to ask questions. That. Senior Villo, what do you mean by the spiritual base last time? After all, I'm Hyenryong from Mesopotamia. When a singularity appeared in Mesopotamia, I naturally came back to take a look. By the way, I appeared in Uruk one step earlier than Merlin. Yes, but it's a pity that Hyenryong, who appeared in Uruk one step earlier than me, left early last time, and he didn't even manage to perish together with me. What a pity. In response to Merlin's whispering, Wuming responded with a murderous glare. However, in Matthew's view, this scene was indeed a quarrel between friends. By the way, it's a great fate that Mr. Merlin and Senior Villo can meet in Uruk. The two of them were both subjects of King Arthur in Britain, and now they met in Uruk as subjects of King Gilgamesh. It was indeed a great fate. But in the end, whether it's in Britain or in Mesopotamia, I'm a level higher than Merlin. Wuming smiled proudly at Merlin. Thinking about it carefully, that's true. Gadotsi thought for a moment and nodded. In Britain, although Wuming and Merlin were both subjects of King Arthur, as the closest subjects of King Arthur, their status was not lower than Merlin's, and even higher. The difference was even greater in Uruk. Previously, Dr. Roman said that Hyenryong in Uruk is equivalent to King Gilgamesh's adoptive father, while Merlin was only King Gilgamesh's court magician. Although it wasn't a crushing victory, no matter how you looked at it, Wuming was superior to Merlin. You're still so merciless, my dear friend. Chapter 903. I think you've forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. In the past, Merlin had been taught a lesson by Wuming several times because of his excessive teasing. Perhaps it was a symbolic lesson that caused Merlin to become even worse. However, Wuming was too lazy to refute Merlin. It is said that the Knight of the Round Table Villo and the great wizard Merlin are close friends. It seems that it is true. Regarding friends, Wuming had to admit that Merlin was possibly, a friend of his for the time being. Wuming knew Merlin during the period of King Uci. He also participated in the plan to create the Red Dragon bloodline. Although Merlin was sometimes disdainful, Wuming and Merlin had indeed become friends. That's right, Villo and I. No, I have to say Hyenryong now. Lord Hyenryong and I are indeed good friends, Sure enough, if you give Merlin some face, he would be able to open a dye house. It's just Merlin. Breathe with gills in the future. Wuming directly gave Merlin a dead fish's eye. What the hell do you mean by breathing with gills? And my name is Merlin. Merlin, not Merman. Merlin waved his staff to express his dissatisfaction, but Wuming turned a blind eye. Sure enough, you two have a good relationship, just like Matthew and me. Seeing this scene, Gadotsi smiled and immediately hugged Matthew. Say, Senior, please don't be like this. Pfft. Miss Anna, who was alone, couldn't help but make a sound. Aw. Even I want to have a good chat with my best friend. Roman from Chaldea also made a sound of dissatisfaction. Oh, if I remember correctly, Romani is someone who doesn't have that kind of beautiful existence. Damn it. Leonardo da Vinci. Don't expose me. It was about time for the farce to end. At this moment, Wuming coughed. Let's talk about my best friend later. Let's continue our conversation. Wuming knocked on the table, and a 3D map projection appeared in front of everyone. This was a map made by Wuming using magic. The mountains, plains, hills, and so on were clearly visible on the map. Even the Uruk and other cities were depicted very realistically, like a high-quality model. Oh. That's amazing. Gadotsi's clear eyes reflected the projected map, and she exclaimed in surprise. The Quetzalcoatl is on our side, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the underworld, so we don't have to worry about it for now. The original goddess of magical beasts was also severely injured when I left last time. It stands to reason that the situation at this moment shouldn't be so serious. Then Merlin continued Wuming's words. Hyenryong's departure last time caused heavy damage to Gorgon, and countless magical beasts were also affected by the aftermath of the battle between Hyenryong and Gorgon. But 3 months ago, for some reason, a large number of strengthened magical beasts poured out of the fir forest. Not only did their physical fitness and size increase, but there were also new types of magical beasts. A large number of new magical beasts and strengthened magical beasts attacked the north wall, and caused heavy damage to the north wall. Merlin recalled the reports from the front line and narrated little by little. These words were not only for Gadotsi, but also for Wuming, who didn't know about these things. Then, 11 magical beasts commanders who claimed to be the sons of Tiamat appeared on the magical beasts front. That night, Mushio Hushio led a large number of mass-produced magical beasts to raid the Uruk from the underground. Our side suffered heavy losses, and nearly 1/3 of the total population of the Uruk were killed. In the end, one of the magical beast commanders, Mushio Hushio, was killed at the cost of sacrificing a servant. Many mass-produced magical beasts were beheaded. Gadotsi and Matthew's expressions were slightly hazy after Merlin's words. All of this was seen by Wuming's eyes. Perhaps Gadotsi and Matthew had learned from the Uruk survivors about the Uruk disaster 3 months ago. There should be many relatives of the victims among them. Gadotsi and Matthew were extremely emotional. Perhaps both of them didn't feel good when they communicated with the relatives of the victims. Sure enough, even after experiencing 6 singularities, the ordinary human Gadotsi and the pure Matthew still couldn't get used to sacrifice. Wuming walked behind Gadotsi and Matthew, then stretched out his hand and rubbed their little heads. Don't worry, I wasn't there back then. Now that I'm back in the Uruk, I won't allow anyone to sacrifice themselves. This is the promise that Winterwood's assassin made to you. And it's also the agreement that the Knight of the Round Table Villo made with you. At the same time, this is also my promise to the people in the land of Mesopotamia, who pray to the gods and believe in Hyenryong as a Uruk. Gadotsi and Matthew were still in a daze at this moment, as if they couldn't react to Wuming's words. But it had to be said that Wuming's words did play a big role in comforting the two. At the very least, their expressions were no longer hazy, and they were full of energy again. Yeah. Assassin, I'll remember. Yes. Senior Villo, it's a promise. On the side, Anna, who saw this scene, was thinking about something, and at the same time, it attracted Wuming's attention. Anna, since I brought Sakura here, then I will be responsible for taking Sakura back. This is also my agreement with you. As you wish. However, the action of tightening the hood again to cover her face showed that Anna's heart was also fluctuating at this moment. Gadotsi and Matthew were confused by the conversation between Wuming and Anna. However, before Wuming could explain, Merlin, who breathed through his gills, broke the beautiful atmosphere. Okay, can you let me continue? Everyone looked at Merlin with murderous eyes. Not only that, but Chaldea's Roman also scolded him. Merlin, you bastard, you really don't know how to read the atmosphere. You're as bad as the records say, damn it. Roman, who had been monitoring the situation in Chaldea's control room, was originally relieved. After all, Gadotsi's happy mood was still helpful for Gadotsi's safety. After all, there was a risk when humans performed ray shift, and they might completely disappear into the past. Along the way from the 6 singularities, Roman had been using equipment to monitor Gadotsi's physical condition. It turned out that a happy mood was beneficial for Gadotsi's safety. However, Gadotsi and Matthew understood Merlin very well. Forget it, Doctor. After all, Mr. Merlin is right. It was originally a meeting to share information. Even if Merlin didn't understand the atmosphere and interrupted, it was reasonable to say that there was nothing wrong. Moreover, there was a reason why Merlin had interjected, because the next topic will be even crueler, so be mentally prepared in advance. Chapter 904. King Gilgamesh, who was deeply aware of the seriousness of the demonic beast commander, resummoned 7 servants and made a plan with the newly summoned servants to attract and disperse the enemy. Together with the remaining servants of the previous summons, a total of 10 servants were dispatched to launch a decapitation operation on the demonic beast commander. 10 servants. Matthew and Gadotsi were really shocked. After all, the number of servants was indeed too many. Although Gadotsi and Mashu did encounter a lot of servants in the first few singularities, those servants were either alone or in small groups. At most, Gadotsi could gather a lot of servants around himself with his master's identity. But in this singularity, King Gilgamesh, as a human in the singularity, had 10 servants under his command. How could this not be shocking? So that's why King Gilgamesh is sitting in Uruk as a magician. Roman from Chaldea also made a reasonable judgment on the posture of the sage king. It was because of the need to command the people that the hero king became the sage king. It was because of the need to summon servants to resist the demonic beasts that Gilgamesh changed from a warrior to a magician. So the supply of magic for so many servants is supported by King Gilgamesh alone. Matthew's question made Gadotsi aware of the problem. After the growth of 6 singularities, Gadotsi also had a lot of understanding of the servant's contract and the supply of magic. Gadotsi was able to form a contract with many servants because of the magic support behind Chaldea. If it was really relying on Gadotsi to provide magic alone, as an ordinary human, she was afraid that she could not even support Matthew to fight. However, this was not Chaldea, but Mesopotamia in BC, and Gilgamesh did not have the magic support behind Chaldea like Gadotsi. In that case, the magic needed to form a contract with so many servants was all provided by Gilgamesh alone. Indeed, assuming that the servants rely on food to replenish their magic, and Gil only provides the magic to maintain the contract, that is quite a large amount of magic power. When Gilgamesh was suggested by Wyrm to summon servants, he proposed that the magic source should be solved by Wyrm, because Wyrm was worried that providing a large amount of magic to the servants would overwhelm Gilgamesh. However, Wyrm's proposal was rejected by Gilgamesh, coupled with the fact that Gilgamesh summoned new servants. The burden on him was not something that ordinary people could bear. King Gilgamesh is so great, I thought he was just a bad-tempered tyrant. Gadotsi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. Ha ha ha, if King Gilgamesh heard it, I'm afraid he would praise you for your honesty. After all, the gift that King Gilgamesh gave you is really rough. At that time, the trial that King Gilgamesh gave to Gadotsi really scared her. At that time, Gadotsi's face changed color. It was no wonder that Gadotsi had a bad impression of King Gilgamesh. No one would have a good impression of a guy who almost killed them when they first met. And Gadotsi was the same. However, listening to Merlin's words, Gadotsi's view of Gilgamesh has greatly changed. Gil won't care about your opinion of him, especially the current Sage King. Don't think too much about it. Wyrm rubbed Gadotsi's head and comforted her. I know. Gadotsi's cheeks were slightly red. Even after experiencing 6 singularities, Gadotsi was still an immature and cute little girl. Then, Wyrm looked at Merlin and restarted the topic. If I didn't guess wrong, the result should not be ideal. That's right. We sacrificed 8 servants to kill 3 demonic beast commanders. Sacrificed 8 servants? Matthew's eyes widened. Only 3 demonic beast commanders. Gadotsi couldn't help but stand up and hit Wyrm behind her. This result is too unsatisfactory. Chaldea's Roman couldn't help but make a helpless sound. Even Leonardo da Vinci, who was always smiling, couldn't smile at this moment. In addition to Merlin and Wyrm, who proposed that the result was not ideal, only Anna didn't have any emotional or physical fluctuations, but Anna's heart was probably not calm at this moment. Including the one that was sacrificed in the Uruk, the result was that a total of 9 servants were sacrificed, but only 4 demonic beast commanders were killed, and there were still 6 demonic beast commanders alive. Even so, there should be more than 2 servants in the Uruk. Wyrm asked again. Huh. Gadotsi and Matthew were stunned again. The result is so miserable because Merlin deliberately said that to let you hear it. As Merlin said before, the next topic will be more cruel. In short, Merlin did it deliberately. As Wyrm spoke, he glanced at Merlin, who was wearing a mischievous smile. And there's one thing I'm sure of. Merlin definitely won't participate in the decapitation operation. So he won't be one of the surviving servants. In that case, the number of servants left in Uruk must be more than 2 mounts. And since there were more than 2 servants left, how could there be only 3 servants left? There must be more than that. Ha ha ha, well said. You are indeed my best friend. At this moment, there are still 10 servants left on the human side. There are still 10 servants left. This number is very optimistic for the current situation. This time it was Roman's voice. Roman is right. After all, there are only 7 servants in the ordinary Holy Grail War. Wyrm said in agreement. Then Wyrm looked at Merlin again. But you should have counted me, Merlin. Of course, after all, you are indeed a servant on our side, aren't you? Sure enough, Merlin was still the strongest when it came to trickery. Matthew and Gadotsi looked at each other. If that was the case, it was really bad. Perhaps Matthew, Anna, and even the leopard man were also included. But it seemed that Merlin was right. In short, let's talk about the remaining servants in addition to the few of you here. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. First of all, one must know yourself. In addition to you, me, Matthew, and Anna, there are Quetzalcoatl, Leopard Man Leonidas I, who is in charge of defense in the North Wall, Nuwakamaru and Musasobo Benkei, who are in the Uruk under the command of King Gilgamesh, and the last one, Zhuge Kong Ming. Zhuge Kong Ming. Chapter 905. Mr. Merlin, are you talking about Zhuge Kong Ming? Is it the military advisor from ancient China? Gudatzi and Matthew asked Merlin. Yes, it is the military advisor of the Shu Kingdom in ancient China, Zhuge Kongming. And the defense plan for the Uruk and the surrounding areas that were not invaded by the demonic beasts was discussed by King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming. After thinking about it carefully, it was indeed a reasonable explanation. After all, if it was really all up to King Gilgamesh, and he had to think about so many problems, he might really die from overwork. I heard that the military advisor had been guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death, not letting it be annexed by the powerful Wei Kingdom. It seems that Mr. Kongming is quite good at defense. In Matthew's view, being able to resist the demonic beasts in a situation where the human forces were so weak, and the people in the Mesopotamia could survive, and even live in peace and contentment, not only highlighted the military advisor's resourcefulness, but also reflected the military advisor's achievements in guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death. Having said that, don't forget about the king of the Uruk who wanted to carry the world on his back, Matthew. Maybe Zhuge Kongming did play a big role, but Gilgamesh's role was certainly not less than Zhuge Kongming's. Villo Sr. is right. To be able to summon so many servants to resist the demonic beasts and establish the North Wall, King Gilgamesh is indeed not as good as Zhuge Kongming. It was not an exaggeration. In Wu Ming's view, even without Zhuge Kongming, Gilgamesh could still resist the attack of the demonic beasts and still ensure that the people under his rule could live in peace and contentment. But the price may be accelerated to death from overwork. By the way, we also met Zhuge Kongming when we were in the Winterwood Singularity. Do you remember Assassin? I don't know if it's the same person. Gudatzi thought of the Zhuge Kongming who used the modern magician's body in the Winterwood Singularity. Maybe it's the real Zhuge Kongming Sr. Matthew also discussed with Gudatzi. However, whether it was the pseudo-servant Zhuge Kongming or the real servant Zhuge Kongming, they were the same person, just different in appearance. Mr. Merlin, what kind of person is Zhuge Kongming? Matthew turned to look at Merlin. As the court magician of King Gilgamesh, Merlin should know the situation of Zhuge Kongming. Unfortunately, I only know that Zhuge Kongming is a person wearing a China-style robe. Because I was often asked to run errands by King Gilgamesh, I didn't have much contact with Zhuge Kongming. To put it simply, Merlin didn't know who was in Castor's team. So, Matthew nodded, indicating that he understood. Since it's a China-style robe, it's probably the real Zhuge Kongming. Gudatzi judged. Maybe there will be a situation like Matthew. Wu Ming interjected. Last time, Zhuge Kongming hid Emilotu's consciousness and used Emilotu's body, clothes, and habits. However, a pseudo-servant could also let the original personality of the body dominate the body. Although Matthew was not a pseudo-servant, Matthew's identity was a sub-servant, which had the same effect as a pseudo-servant. When Matthew used the power of Galahad, the clothes on his body would turn into purple armor. Therefore, it was also possible that Emilotu would wear Zhuge Kongming's clothes. Then Wu Ming thought of the leopard man. By the way, the leopard man here may be the same, but the situation may be completely opposite. Wu Ming didn't realize it before, but thinking about it carefully, Wu Ming did see that face in Ilya's world. Miss Leopard Man is also a pseudo-servant. Villo Sr. means that Miss Leopard Man is a god on the inside, and the appearance is a human on the outside? Although they were shocked, Matthew and Gudatzi recalled the leopard man's doll-like appearance, and they couldn't help but believe Wu Ming's words. Although Dr. Roman did prove that the leopard man was a divine servant, no matter how he looked at it, it was impossible for there to be a god with such a funny appearance. Sure enough, it was caused by a spirit base similar to a pseudo-servant. But the leopard man's situation is not enough to reach the point of pseudo-servant. The leopard man's bestiality is too serious, and there is almost no humanity. At most, it can only be a slight pseudo-servant. Okay, although I don't want to interrupt you, first of all, you have to know that I don't have the slightest combat power. How come? Merlin's words made Gudatzi and Matthew show surprised and disappointed expressions. Zhuge Kongming's horror is not his combat power, but his wisdom. As for Merlin, Wu Ming looked at Merlin, who looked at him with expectation and trust. Even Merlin wouldn't make such a joke at this moment. Merlin probably has his own reasons. Merlin doesn't count as combat power. Ha ha ha. Although Mafa Merlin had been ridiculed by Mafa Merlin, he was still very happy. Regarding the current situation, Gerdatsi and Mashu whispered to each other. I feel that Mr. Merlin is so pitiful. It turns out that Mashu also thinks so. At this moment, the current meeting was almost over, and Wuming also spoke at the last moment. In short, since the military advisor is in the Uruk, no matter how bad the situation is, the Uruk will probably be fine, Wuming said with a kind smile. Looking at Wuming's kind smile, Gerdatsi, Matthew, and even Anna felt a chill down their spines. In other words, we can be bolder. When Wuming said this, Gerdatsi and the others felt even more chills down their spines. So Lord Hyunryong, what new plan do you have? Merlin also looked at Wuming with a smile, but at this moment, Merlin's smile was more and more similar to Wuming's in the eyes of Gerdatsi and the others. It wasn't unreasonable for these two guys to be best friends. This was the so-called birds of a feather flock together. Let's go and conquer the useless Venus goddess. Chapter 906. Northwest of Mesopotamia, at the foot of Mount Abif, where the mountain range stretched out continuously, black and purple ripples suddenly appeared here. Then, like carps jumping out of the water, one figure after another jumped out of the black and purple ripples and stood firmly on the ground. There was a black-haired, red-eyed youth wearing the common male clothing of this era, a white-haired nightmare holding a wooden staff, an orange-haired girl with a single ponytail wearing a special magic dress, and a cute girl wearing a slightly revealing purple armor with one of her eyes covered by a fringe. The newcomers were Wuming, Merlin, and the slightly reluctant Gerdatsi and Matthew. The four of them all arrived at the foot of Mount Abif. Is it really okay for us to leave Miss Anna there like this? Matthew, who had his feet on the ground, was the first to speak uneasily and slightly embarrassed. It's okay, Matthew. This is also Anna's idea. Wuming was right. This was indeed Anna's idea. Previously, when Wuming was prepared to bring Gerdatsi and the others to cause trouble, to attack the Venus goddess, Anna expressed that she was not interested in it. She would rather stay and help clear out the monsters in the surrounding area. After all, Wuming was not an unreasonable person. Since Anna had volunteered to stay, Wuming did not ask the others and agreed like a dictator. Don't forget that we received King Gilgamesh's order to support the feathered serpent god. Leaving one of us there means that we have indeed played a role and completed the mission. Also, we can inform the feathered serpent god and the leopard man that we have temporarily left. Moreover, Anna was the one who suggested it. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone, Merlin explained. But, if we do this half-heartedly, is it really okay for us to complete King Gilgamesh's mission? Will it ruin King Gilgamesh's plan? Not only was Matthew worried about this, but so was Gerdatsi. Matthew is right. Sigh, I don't want to be given another trial by King Gilgamesh when I go back. Gerdatsi said as her face turned pale, as if she was recalling the life and death trial. Facts had proven that even if one's perception of a person changed, the fear of that person would not disappear in a short time. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll take care of it. Wuming walked to the two of them and patted their heads. His tone was rather confident. Anyway, Gilgamesh had asked the pterosaur to send over the clay tablet that Gerdatsi and the others had to listen to his commands after meeting him. Wasn't it Wuming's order to capture the Venus goddess? Gerdatsi and the others were indeed listening to Wuming's order. So Gilgamesh wouldn't blame Gerdatsi and the others. Everything would be taken care of by Wuming. Senior Villo, I think we should be more cautious. After all, there are still 6 commanders among the demonic beasts. I'm a little worried about Anna alone. Worried that Anna will be in danger alone? Wuming guessed and continued Matthew's words. Matthew nodded. After all, the demonic beast commander is an existence that requires multiple servants to defeat, and it's a way to perish together. Gerdatsi also said. It was normal for Gerdatsi and Matthew to be worried. The data was clearly there. Seeing this, Merlin had to stand up and boost their morale. Don't worry, Matthew, to Chica. The reason why there is a data of multiple servants perishing together to kill the demonic beast commander is entirely because of the situation. This was because of Wuming's attention. After all, Wuming wasn't very clear about the specific content of it. What do you mean by this? At that moment, they didn't move toward the Abiv mountain, but they found a place to sit and sat down. One of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Hushio, appeared from the Uruk underground and attacked the Uruk. He didn't cause much damage to the Uruk, and he was completely killed by his own pride. After all, Gilgamesh was in charge of the Uruk, and there were many servants. A single demonic beast commander couldn't set off a storm in the Uruk at that time. At the same time when Merlin paused, Matthew, who was like a student listening to a lecture, raised his hand. But Mr. Merlin, you said that at that time, a servant was sacrificed to kill the demonic beast commander, and nearly 1/3 of the population in the Uruk city was killed. However, Merlin shook his head. The so-called sacrificed servant was Okita Soki, who was a saber. Okita Soki was seriously injured after the war, but he didn't die. He would recover completely after a few days of rest. However, Okita Soki's skill, Frail, was activated at that time. At this point, Merlin paused and did not continue. However, even if Merlin had said this, everyone more or less understood. Don't tell me. Matthew looked inconceivable. Don't tell me. Godatsi's whole face was filled with an inconceivable expression. It can't be right. Wu Ming remembered that when Okita Soki was first summoned, he did spit out blood. And from the name of the skill, Frail, it could be said that the effect of the skill was obvious. Yes, because of the activation of Frail. Although the injury was serious but not fatal, it directly became a fatal injury. The most fatal injury to a servant was the broken spirit core, and that was the end of the servant's life. This Roman, who was in the Chaldea control room, was stunned. He even stopped recording what happened in the singularity. It was completely unimaginable that there would be a servant who was forced to leave because of a skill. As a genius, this is the first time I've heard of such a situation. However, if it's the Okita Soki who was tortured by illness, it's indeed possible. Da Vinci calmly analyzed the situation. The skill Frail can turn a serious injury into a fatal injury. It seems that the level of the skill is not low. It should be above B class. Maybe it has reached A class. Moreover, perhaps Saber's luck value was not high. Listening to Leonardo da Vinci's voice through Godatsi's wrist, Wu Ming silently complained in his heart. Only a low luck value could explain this. Otherwise, how could Miss Okita encounter such an incredible thing? Chapter 907. Cough cough. In short, all of these are coincidences within coincidences, the result of coincidences within coincidences. Merlin, who could not hold back his laughter, immediately covered up for himself. Godatsi and the others did not pay attention to Merlin's fleeting laughter. They were still puzzled by the fact that a servant would die under their own skills. Although according to what Merlin said, it is indeed similar to mutual destruction, but you actually deliberately exaggerated it. This once again confirmed Merlin's previous words. The next topic will be more cruel, so be prepared in advance. In short, it was still Merlin's bad taste. Wu Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about these things. The reason why a servant in Mushio and Hushio mutual destruction was figured out. Then the next thing was, so why did 8 of the 10 servants who carried out the decapitation operation, and only 2 of them came back? That was the main point. The decapitation operation carried out by the 10 servants could be said to be very successful, and it was not as bad as you think. For the result of the decapitation operation, Merlin thought that it was already very good. Although because of the plan of King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming, the demonic beast commanders were temporarily separated, but even if there is only one demonic beast commander, there are demonic beasts everywhere around it. And to complete the decapitation operation meant that they must go deep into the demonic beast group, and because of King Gilgamesh's magical burden, the servants he summoned were not first-class servants, and it was impossible for them to besiege one demonic beast commander with 10 servants. Not to mention that the efficiency was not high, and it was bound to alert the other demonic beast commanders. In case the other demonic beast commanders noticed the problem and gathered together, then they really couldn't do anything. It is basically impossible to get close to the demonic beast commander when the 10 servants are separated. It is basically impossible to kill the commander and retreat while surrounded by so many demonic beasts. Even if it was second-rate or third-rate servants, if 2 or 3 servants fought together, it was still possible to kill a demonic beast commander. The fact also proved that this idea was indeed feasible. 8 servants in exchange for the death of 3 demonic beast commanders. And to put it bluntly, demonic beast commanders seem to be unable to be mass-produced, and King Gilgamesh could summon servants again as long as he could hold on, although he probably won't do that again. In the end, there were 2 servants that returned to Uruk alive. For a one-way decapitation mission, it was a pleasant surprise that a servant could come back alive. After sacrificing the lives of 3 demon commanders, 2 followers came back alive. Based on this Operation Decapitation alone, it's already an excellent result. Merlin was very optimistic about this. How could this be? Matthew was shocked. Isn't this a suicide squad? Gadotsi vividly interpreted the essence of the beheading operation. Indeed, King Gilgamesh didn't expect the 10 servants to come back alive. King Gilgamesh assigned this task with the consent of the servants, and they were also very willing to serve as a suicide squad, in order to give hope and a future for mankind. Merlin said the truth indifferently. This is too cruel. Matthew's eyes were full of sadness again. Although it was cruel, Matthew really couldn't refute it. Was this the so-called necessary sacrifice? Humans couldn't deal with demonic beast commanders. Only servants could, and combined with the situation at that time, they could only send servants to the depths of the demonic beasts to carry out the decapitation operation. However, even so, in the face of another sacrifice, Matthew still couldn't look at this problem calmly. Matthew, in a war, anyone's sacrifice is just a number. This is the essence of war. In the past, he, Artoria, and many knights of the Round Table led countless knights to fight in the north and south, and it could be said that he had already seen through the essence of war. But, in this war between the demonic beasts and the humans, even if the servants sacrificed themselves, as long as their sacrifice created the conditions for the humans to win in the future, then their sacrifice was not in vain. Just like the servants who sacrificed themselves for you in the previous 6 singularities, we should remember them and work harder for the next operation. We can't let their sacrifice go to waste. Merlin is right. The original 11 demonic beast commanders have now been reduced to 6, but there are still 10 servants on the human side. The scale of victory is gradually tilting to our side. At this time, we should work harder. How can we be depressed because of the servant's sacrifice? Yes, Villo-senpai, I'm still recovering, sorry. Matthew patted his cheek and recovered again. Because of his incomparable emotional state, Matthew's mood recovered quickly after the training of 6 singularities. However, at this time, Gadotsi noticed some problems. Wait a minute. Why are there still 6 demonic beast commanders left? Didn't we defeat 4 in total? It stands to reason that there should be 7 demonic beast commanders left, right? This was something that Matthew didn't notice. Gadotsi counted his fingers and thought to himself, could it be that he had miscalculated? This is my negligence. When I came here before, I encountered a demonic beast commander and killed it, so there are 6 demonic beast commanders left. Indeed, only Wuming and Merlin knew about the death of the prototype Yulidum. After that, the 2 of them didn't talk about it, so it was normal that Gadotsi didn't know about it. Wait a minute, was the previous light beam caused by Villo? Roman's incomparably shocked voice came from Gadotsi's bracelet, and Wuming could imagine Roman's expression at the moment. That guy was different from the other demonic beasts, so I paid a little attention to it, but I overdid it. Wuming smiled a little embarrassedly. Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and Leonardo da Vinci fell into a state of shock. Ha ha ha, Lord Hyunryong overdid it a little, but it's very scary. Only Merlin smiled at the side. Forget it, the Knights of the Round Table can be Uruk Hyunryong, so it's not surprising that you can kill a demonic beast commander alone. It's not alone. That Yulidum has quite a few mass-produced Yulidum by its side. Although Wuming really didn't care about them, they were indeed destroyed by the aftermath of Wuming's attack. Sure enough, Senior Villo is really strong. I think so too, Matthew. The conversation between the two had other meanings, and Wuming was still a little unaware. He could not underestimate the enemy, nor could he pay too much attention to the enemy. This way, he could pay attention to the enemy without too much pressure and achieve the best results. One thing is clear now. Merlin, you deliberately exaggerated the current situation. It's obviously not to that extent yet. There should be a limit to your jokes. Gudatzi and Matthew, who agreed with Wuming's words, nodded, and then looked at Merlin with indifferent eyes. I'm just trying to make everyone feel more threatened. Why are you treating me like a bad guy? Alas, it's hard to be a good person. Gudatzi and Matthew were a little moved by Merlin's words. Moreover, if Wuming did not know Merlin well, Wuming might have been deceived too. In short, although the major monsters are very powerful, our forces are not weak either. You don't need to worry about Anna. After all, that is the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. Thinking of the Quetzalcoatl who once showed him great respect, Wuming had to admit that as a god, that guy was completely qualified. Don't underestimate the Quetzalcoatl. With the Quetzalcoatl, unless Tiamat appears in person, the southern jungle will be a very safe place. Yes. We understand. Gudatzi and Matthew stood up and saluted Wuming, like primary school students who listen to their teacher. Then, let's go and head to the Temple of Abiff Mountain. Then the four of them set off to climb Abiff Mountain. As they walked all the way up the mountain road, Matthew took the lead and asked, "By the way, is the goddess of Venus in the temple on this mountain?" Although Wuming did not make it clear who it was, just the word goddess of Venus basically exposed who they would meet next. Speaking of the goddess of Venus in Mesopotamia, I'm afraid only Ishtar is the goddess of Venus. Is she the mistress of the heavens? In Chaldea's control room, Roman sat in front of his seat, his hands constantly tapping on the keyboard. The screen in front of Roman also showed images that ordinary people could not understand. But Chaldea's instruments have detected that there are only 4 gods in Mesopotamia. What's going on? 4. Gudatzi stopped. He didn't understand what was going on. The doctor is referring to the 4 gods, the goddess of warcraft, the Quetzalcoatl, the goddess of the underworld, and Senior Villo. The first 3 were the goddesses of the 3 Goddesses Alliance. Although Wuming did not say much, his spiritual base also belonged to the Uruk-Yenryong. But Assassin said that there is a goddess on this mountain. So shouldn't there be 5 gods? Gudatzi subconsciously looked at the top of the mountain, where she could vaguely see the shadow of the temple. I'm also wondering about this. On the big screen in front of Roman, 5 dialogue boxes appeared. The goddess of warcraft, the Quetzalcoatl, the goddess of the underworld, and the Uruk-Yenryong each occupied a box, but the last box was a series of question marks. Is it possible that the divinity is not strong enough, so it can't be detected? Matthew asked. The leopard man they encountered before was also a god, but if they didn't encounter him, Chaldea's instruments couldn't detect his existence at all. Only gods with strong divinity like the goddess of warcraft and the Quetzalcoatl could be detected by Chaldea's instruments without contact. That's impossible. Ishtar is the mistress of the sky. Even if she is a pseudo-servant at the moment, her divinity can't be that weak. Wuming saw Ishtar the last time he came here. Although she came as a pseudo-servant in the form of a girl, her divinity didn't decrease much. She was still a very powerful divine servant. Oh. Another pseudo-servant. Gudatzi nodded. She always felt that she always encountered pseudo-servants. Although Ishtar is a pseudo-servant, she is much more powerful than the leopard man, Wuming added. At that moment, the almighty Leonardo da Vinci spoke. Is it related to the goddess of the underworld? Chapter 909. What does this have to do with the goddess of the underworld? Gudatzi expressed that she really didn't know anything about the myths of the Mesopotamia region. The goddess of the underworld that Leonardo da Vinci refers to is in existence named Ereshkigal. She is known as the mistress of the underworld. In a sense, she is the half-body of the mistress of the heavens, Ishtar. Wuming explained to Gudatzi. He was also a Uruk-Yenryong. As a local, at least he knew more than Roman and the others. Since there is a legend of half-body, it naturally means that the two are different sides of the same pillar god. In this case, the goddess of the underworld and the loser goddess on this mountain should be considered the same pillar god. If they share the same divinity, it's normal that they can't be detected. If the goddess of the underworld is Ereshkigal, then this situation is true. Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's seat, was constantly tapping on the keyboard, modifying the data of the singularity of Mesopotamia registered in Chaldea's database. It's very likely that, as Hyenryong said, Chaldea only detected the existence of 4 gods. Roman made the final confirmation. Although I don't have a good impression of that girl. Even if she is a loser, she is still a goddess. If she joins us and signs a temporary contract with Tachika, it will be a big boost to our combat power. Wuming had this idea, which was why he dragged Gadatsi and Matthew to Mount Abiff. And in this way, even Gil won't say anything about you leaving the southern jungle without permission. After all, compared to getting the loser goddess to join us, it's unwise to let the loser goddess be a lone follower. After all, it was more reassuring to have an unstable element in one's hands than to let it go. How dare you say that? You bastard! The voice of a young girl filled with resentment entered the ears of everyone who had climbed halfway up the mountain. Master, it's a servant's reaction. Please stand behind me. Matthew instantly opened his hand and conjured a shield. He stood in front of Gadatsi, protecting her behind him. In the face of unknown servants, the first thing to do was to protect their master. What's this reaction? Is it a god? Roman, who was in Chaldea, was shocked when he saw the results of the instrument. Ishtar, he said. Wuming looked up at the charming person sitting on the bow-like heavenly ship Anna in the sky. I didn't expect you to have the guts to look for me here, Hyenryong. Ishtar's resentment towards Wuming seemed to be particularly big, and Ishtar didn't seem to pay attention to anyone else. She only paid attention to Wuming. Vilo-senpai, what's going on? Matthew couldn't help but ask. From Ishtar's reaction, it was obvious that Wuming had provoked him, and it was not a light one. Don't ask me. Even if you ask me, I don't have the impression of provoking this troublesome guy. Hey. Don't ignore me whispering there. Along with Ishtar's furious voice, a piercing sound came into everyone's ears. Whoosh. A golden flash of light shot straight towards Wuming. Vilo-senpai. Assassin. Matthew and Gadatsi couldn't help but shout. Clank. And Zurgen's staff appeared from the side, and Wuming held it directly in his hand, and the golden flash hit it directly. This is... The twisted golden staff attracted everyone's attention, and the 7 snake heads inlaid with different colored gems were full of noble and strange colors. Even Ishtar froze in midair with her hands in a shooting position. Ah. I know. Roman, who thought he had completely figured it out, was the first to speak and break the silence. As we all know, the fight for power is extremely common in myths. Even the virtuous, Uruk Hyenryong also has a desire for power. According to the Gilgamesh epic records, the Uruk Hyenryong once seized Ishtar's position as the Uruk city god, and drove Ishtar out of the Uruk. There are also many small stories that have been investigated by many scholars and experts. Although various experts and professors have different opinions, there are many parts that are worth referencing. For example, Uruk Hyenryong seized other things from Ishtar. When Roman said this, Wuming more or less understood what he was trying to say. The staff in Hyenryong's hand is obviously consistent with the 7-headed war hammer staff that belonged to Ishtar in the myths. So, it's probably because the Uruk Hyenryong seized a lot of things from Ishtar that caused Ishtar to hate the Uruk Hyenryong. Roman explained with confidence. Gadatsi and Matthew nodded as if they had suddenly seen the light. Only Merlin watched the scene unfold with a smile, and did not say anything. If Wuming didn't know whether he had done it or not, he might have believed it too. When he thought about it carefully, Roman's analysis was indeed quite reasonable. In this way, it was understandable that Ishtar was full of resentment and anger towards Wuming. What the hell is this? Wuming sighed helplessly. Reasonable? 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 Facts were facts. This was something that couldn't be said carelessly. Wuming didn't steal anything from Ishtar at all. Well, the idea of stealing the Uruk's city guardian was also nonsense. However, Wuming could more or less understand why all of this turned out like this. Wuming, who didn't like Ishtar, did drive Ishtar away in the past, but that was only because Ishtar had done something that he couldn't do, so Wuming did that. And Ishtar would come back soon because she couldn't do without the tributes from the citizens, such as gems, and so on. Perhaps it was because he had driven her away too many times, coupled with the fact that the records of later generations weren't perfect. The story was gradually changed into that Uruk Hyenryong stole the position of the Uruk's city guardian from Ishtar. Wuming also understood. After all, the various myths in modern times were the result of people's exaggerations in history. As for the so-called seven-headed warhammer staff, it was purely because it was similar. It wasn't Ishtar's staff at all. But did Ishtar really think so? Yes, that's right. I'm talking to you, Hyenryong. Give me back my seven-headed warhammer staff. At this moment, Ishtar didn't care whether what Roman said was true or not. She was going to make the best of it. She had her eyes on the gorgeous staff. Chapter 9-10. At that moment, Gadotsi and Matthew didn't know what to say. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in the Chaldea control room, naturally didn't speak again. It was obvious that the matter was both complicated and simple. But all in all, Wuming seemed to be in the right. Even Gadotsi and Matthew could see that Ishtar was obviously panicking. Ishtar was obviously the kind of person who couldn't refute after her lie was exposed in front of her elders. Only Merlin, who knew what was going on, half-squatted on the ground with his back facing everyone. He seemed to be laughing so hard that he was twitching. You stupid goddess, are you blinded by money? You don't even know how to lie. Ishtar was even more embarrassed by Wuming's words. After all, this was indeed the truth. Ishtar could speak casually in front of others, but in front of Wuming, it was a little difficult. Although I also know that you want to take advantage of Roman's words, and take my Ains Uar Gong staff for yourself, I still have to say that your IQ matches the number of gems you have. Finally, Wuming shouted a sentence. You shameless loser and stupid goddess. Reflect on yourself. The roar like a dragon resounded through the sky, and Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but cover their ears. The magic contained in Wuming's voice even interfered with the communication between Chaldea and Gadotsi. In short, although Wuming's voice couldn't spread to the Uruk, it was not a problem for it to spread to the entire Abif Mountain. However, no matter who was right or wrong in this matter, Wuming's voice was a disaster not much worse than social death for Ishtar. Damn Hyenryong. As if she had lost her mind, Ishtar hugged her head with both hands, and her eyes lost their focus. She sat on Horse Anna and swayed as if she was about to fall off. Seeing this scene, the innocent little angel Mashu quickly reminded Ishtar. After all, Ishtar really looked like a daughter who couldn't do anything if no one took care of her. Miss Ishtar, please be careful. It's dangerous. Matthew's words made Ishtar stunned, but then, she also recovered from the torture given by Wuming. Don't worry, I won't fall off Horse Anna. Ishtar flipped her hair as she spoke. Her whole person was full of charm, which was very much in line with her image as the mistress of the heavens, if the terrible scene from before was ignored. Speaking of which, where were we just now? With one hand on her chin, Ishtar was quite distressed as she recalled the conversation between her and Wuming. This made Wuming blush with shame. He always felt that this goddess who descended by relying on the body of a human girl had become quite unreliable. Don't even think about my staff of Anza Vulgan, loser goddess. Also, quickly go back to Uruk and be a city god. The demonic beasts have caused serious damage to this land, and the Uruk needs your strength. 3 times. Ishtar's face darkened. You actually called me loser goddess 3 times. You're dead. Ishtar roared and aimed the simulated scope in Wuming's direction. Horse Anna began to gather magic. Master, be careful. Matthew approached Gadotsi and raised his shield again. Senior Villo, please be careful. However, Wuming did not pay attention to Matthew's words. His attention was on something else. Wuming had said loser goddess more than 3 times, but Ishtar had only heard it 3 times. In other words, Ishtar had just arrived. So it was at that time. Wuming whispered to himself. I heard it all before. You completely disliked my wanton behavior and wanted to detain me. I won't listen to you and sign a temporary contract with the human master over there. Wuming's heart sank. Sure enough, Ishtar had heard what he said at that time. Can you be considered the mistress of the heavens like this? Ishtar, when your father and the others disappeared, you only know how to run away. I prefer the stubborn and mischievous goddess of the past who can be straightforward and stupid, and not the current loser goddess. You're a disgrace to the title of mistress of the heavens. I think you might as well stay in the border area of the Mesopotamia until we save this world. Loser goddess. Gadotsi and Matthew both looked at Wuming in shock. They were shocked that Wuming could say such harsh and mocking words. Even Merlin, who had been released from his stomach ache from laughing state, became slightly more serious. At the same time, the atmosphere at the scene became very oppressive. It was like a precursor to a volcanic eruption. However, since it was called a precursor, it meant that there was no danger at the moment. Tianzhou Horse Anna's magic cannon muzzle also stopped condensing magic. What did you say? Ishtar was provoked by Wuming's words. At this moment, her face was even gloomier than before. The magic emitted from her body made Gadotsi and Matthew tremble. Senior Villo. Why don't you stop talking for now? Matthew and Gadotsi tried to persuade Wuming. After all, it was not a wise thing to unilaterally anger the other party, was it not? However, this was the effect Wuming wanted. As the mistress of the heavens, Ishtar also had a very strong self-esteem, except when it came to gems. Through this aspect he could well control the angry Ishtar. Of course, there was also a chance that it would make the other party even more furious. Next, it was time to see how Wuming would turn the situation around. I'm telling the truth. If you were Father God and the others, you would definitely take the initiative to clean up the magic beasts raging on the earth and protect the humans who believe in the gods. And you, if I'm not wrong, in addition to driving Tianzhou Horse Anna around, you would definitely only go to a sparsely populated place like the ranch to kill a few magic beasts, and then sweep away the ranch owner's money, Ishtar. Wuming's words made Ishtar's face turn red instead of exploding. The magic stagnant at Ma Anna's muzzle also dissipated. What are you talking about? How could I do that? I'm just taking the offerings from the ranch owner. In other words, you did do that. This time, it was Wuming's turn to be gloomy. How thick-skinned must she be to do such a thing? Squeak. Seeing Wuming like this, Ishtar seemed to be frightened and let out a strange cry. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in Chaldea's control room, looked like they had seen a ghost. At this moment, they felt like Wuming was the perfect counter to Ishtar. You just wait. I'm not done with you, Ishtar said fiercely as she rode Tianzhou Horse Anna to the top of the mountain. However, not knowing if it was an illusion, Gadotsi and the others felt that Ishtar was crying when she said this. Was the mistress of the heavens being bullied by the Uruk Hyenryong and crying? That's impossible, probably. Chapter 9:11. While everyone else was entangled by these messy matters, only Merlin was paying attention to Wuming with a clear mind. He felt that Wuming's expression at the moment was a bit similar to how he felt when he faced Artoria. Although the target was different, Wuming did give Merlin such a feeling at the moment. A worried old father. That's right. Wuming at the moment seemed to be worried about his disobedient daughter. Wuming was indeed worried. Everyone in Mesopotamia knew that Ishtar was spoiled by the gods. Although she was a good god, she always did evil things. Back then, the reason why Wuming came to the Uruk was mainly because Wuming was tricked by Morgan Le Fay. By chance, he forcibly unlocked the bloodline of the Origin of Dragon, allowing Wuming to use the body of the Origin of Dragon when he was still a minor. However, at that time, Wuming was too accustomed to the body of the Origin of Dragon, and the awakening of the bloodline was not perfect. He could not control the body almost perfectly like Wuming now. In any case, Wuming awakened the Origin of Dragon by accident. In addition, Wuming was indeed injured at that time. Otherwise, Wuming would not have hidden to recuperate and used the statue that people made for him as his eyes to observe the Uruk. After that, Wuming used this eye to observe Ishtar's series of evil deeds. Wuming did not hate Ishtar, or rather, Wuming did not hate anyone, provided that no one provoked him. As long as no one provoked him, everything was fine. Wuming's attitude towards Ishtar was the same. As long as Ishtar did not provoke him, he would not pay attention to Ishtar. However, things did not go as planned. Ishtar would do some troublesome things from time to time. Not only did she easily provoke Wuming, but the Uruk citizens also always prayed to Wuming. The content of the prayers was not excessive like getting rid of Ishtar, but they were basically complaints about Ishtar and begging Ishtar to stop her evil deeds. Wuming was respected and worshipped by the citizens of the Uruk and even Mesopotamia. When Ishtar really crossed the line and provoked him, Wuming would teach her a lesson. For example, he would beat Ishtar up and chase her out of the Uruk. At that time, Wuming was completely unfamiliar with his dragon body. He did not have a certain degree of understanding and development. Naturally, he was not that strong, but he was not so weak that he could not even defeat Ishtar. Logically speaking, Wuming's dragon body would only be completely restored after reaching adulthood. By chance, Wuming's dragon body was unlocked in advance, and it could be regarded as a considerable increase in strength. However, even if Wuming defeated Ishtar, the Sumer gods were still around at that time. Even if it was a lesson, Wuming could not go too far. Even if the Sumer gods were afraid of Wuming's identity, if he did not give them face and taught Ishtar a lesson, who knew what the Sumer gods would do in the end? Even a cornered dog would jump over a wall, let alone a group of gods. Therefore Wuming, who was not invincible, had to learn to be moderate. Besides, it did not mean that he had to use force to teach. Most of the time, wisdom was better than force. Especially when facing Ishtar, the spoiled mistress of the heavens, Wuming found that it was particularly easy for him to use his brain to deal with her. However, it was as if she had forgotten the pain after the scar healed. After a few days, she would naturally return as if nothing had happened. Godin, who was also Ishtar's father, once came to look for Wuming, and the two had a short conversation about Ishtar. It was nothing more than taking care of Ishtar, saying that she was still young and immature, and so on. Godin was like a parent meeting the class teacher. However, every time Wuming talked about Ishtar's mistakes, the other party would always smile and change the topic, constantly asking Wuming to help take care of Ishtar. This made Wuming very helpless. After all, even if you asked Wuming to take care of Ishtar, he could not do so. After all, Ishtar did not have the slightest respect for Wuming. To put it simply, Ishtar would not listen to Wuming at all. It was like a naughty student being reprimanded by the class teacher. On the surface, they would say that they would change, but afterward, they would forget everything they promised. Ishtar was obviously such a student, and whether it was in the open or in the dark, she did not show the slightest willingness to be obedient. She still did things her own way, and in the end, she became even worse. The Bull of Heaven incident was the embodiment of Ishtar's worsening behavior. However, it was not only bad. Ever since the Bull of Heaven incident, Ishtar had a trace of fear for Wuming. Although Ishtar herself was not aware of it, Wuming obviously noticed it. Wuming also had a big prejudice against Ishtar because she indirectly released the Bull of Heaven. Therefore, after that incident, Wuming became stricter with Ishtar. Ishtar, who had a trace of fear, was also frightened by Wuming's strictness. Gradually, she did not return to Uruk. This was probably the origin of the legend that Uruk Hyenryong was the Uruk city god who stole Ishtar. Not long after that, the gods gradually separated from humans, and gradually left the human world. Wuming also left Uruk with Enkidu, who was opportunistically avoided death by himself. However, after the Bull of Heaven incident, the nature of the relationship between Wuming and Ishtar did indeed change. Especially now that Ishtar appeared as a pseudo-servant, the special relationship between the two became even more obvious. If one had to describe it, it was like the relationship between a melancholy homeroom teacher and a naughty student had changed to an old father and a spoiled daughter. Because there was still kindness in Ishtar's bones, and Wuming's previous actions were also good intentions. After the gods disappeared, Ishtar, who appeared as a pseudo-servant in this world, had a feeling of dependence on Hian Riyang, who used to be very strict with her. It was like a naughty student whose father was in trouble would subconsciously ask for help from their neighbor, who used to take care of them and teach them a lesson. However, neither of them noticed this, otherwise, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Merlin, as a bystander, saw through everything. This was probably the onlooker sees the game more clearly. Villo-senpai, what should we do next? Anyway, Matthew thought that her brain couldn't think anymore. This series of events made Matthew at a loss, and she didn't know what to do next. Continue to climb the mountain. Wuming pointed at the faintly visible palace on the mountain, and then immediately moved. Since we're already here, if we don't bring Ishtar back, I'll feel bad no matter how I think about it. However, as soon as Wuming finished his sentence, the entire Abyss mountain shook violently. Chapter 9:12. What's going on? Gudatsi, who lost her balance and almost fell, could not help but look at Wuming. Oh, it seems to be an Abyss spirit. Merlin looked thoughtfully in a certain direction on the mountain, and said in surprise, Abyss spirit. Gudatsi and Matthew were full of doubts about the so-called Abyss spirit. What is that? A monster? A ghost? However, at the next moment, as if responding to Gudatsi and Matthew's doubts, a super-huge magical pig rushed down from the mountain. From the looks of it, it seemed like it wanted to destroy Gudatsi and the others in one blow. That's an Abyss spirit? Gudatsi was shocked. It was clearly a large magical beast. After Mount Abifu was killed by the former Ishtar, a magical beast was naturally formed in the mountain. The magical beast represents the anger of Mount Abifu, so it's called the Abyss spirit. However, everyone had no time to listen to Wuming's explanation. At this moment, whether it was the current speed of the magical pig or the position of everyone, it clearly pointed out the situation they were in at the moment. It's a big crisis. Although his words were full of panic, Matthew immediately put up his shield in front of everyone. Master! Matthew glanced at Gudatsi, and Gudatsi nodded knowingly. At this time, it was obviously unrealistic to escape, so Matthew was ready to activate his noble phantasm to resist the impact of the magical pig. Gudatsi was also ready to support him with her command spell just in case. At this time, Wuming suddenly walked to Matthew, who had already put up his shield, put his hand on Matthew's shoulder, and said, Let me do it. Senior Villo? Matthew could not make up his mind for a while, and turned to look at his senior. Gudatsi nodded. Since Wuming said so, she believed in him. Senior Villo, please be careful. Matthew did not withdraw his shield. After talking to Wuming, he returned to Gudatsi's side. Even with the protection of Senior Villo, he can't relax. He still has to protect his senior. Assassin, how are you going to deal with it? Gudatsi looked at the magical pig that was getting closer and closer, and looked at Wuming with a little panic. Tachika, do you know that I'm partly responsible for the reason why Mount Abifu was killed by Ishtar? As if reflecting this sentence, when a Bifling saw Wuming standing at the front, it became even angrier, and even sped up a little. You're also partly responsible? Gudatsi was stunned. You can say that I didn't save him. Without further explanation, Wuming looked at a Bifling, who was getting angrier, and stretched out his hand. Wuming has long known that Mount Abifu will be killed by Ishtar, through his understanding of the mysterious world. Therefore, Wuming did not intervene too much in this matter. When he came to the land of Mesopotamia, he had several conversations with the mountain spirit of Mount Abifu. When he brought Gil to Mount Abifu also gave Wuming a lot of convenience. It was precisely because of his good impression that Wuming helped Mount Abifu and sent Ishtar away to avoid Mount Abifu's death. However, when the Ishtar in the parallel world learned about Gilgamesh's gender, her anger affected Mount Abifu, and Wuming's inaction was also a factor. Although that happened in the parallel world, it will be similar in this world. What happened in the parallel world where Wuming is in, other parallel worlds will definitely be affected to a certain extent. Wuming knows in his heart that the suppression force of the M-shaped moon world will definitely do this. Therefore, when facing the angry Abifu in this parallel world, Wuming had a strange feeling. He and the mountain spirit of Mount Abifu are not very close friends, but they are still friends. Wuming still has a trace of regret for his inaction in the beginning. This is also one of the few regrets of Wuming in the continuous travel that continues to this day. The appearance of the Abifu spirit is probably related to my voice just now. Since I'm the one who lured it out, then I'll clean it up. Wuming doesn't know whether the killing of Ishtar in this parallel world by the Abifu mountain has direct or indirect relationship with him, but Wuming can be sure of one thing. At this moment, the Abifu spirit in front of Wuming has become an existence like a violent spirit, and the only thing Wuming can do is to give it relief. Thinking of this, Wuming condensed a large amount of magic power in his hand. The powerful magic power caused the air to flow rapidly, thus creating wind. Moreover, the extremely dense magic power source in Wuming's hand also produced some gravitational force, slowly attracting the surrounding stones and soil. Seeing this, Merlin's expression changed. Merlin is not interested in anything else, but the move Wuming is about to use. This magic power. Roman and Chaldea also saw the data results from the detection instrument and made a shocked sound. Could it be? Immediately afterward, the magic power source in Wuming's hand that had reached the limit of density suddenly compressed. In an instant, a high-intensity hurricane spread from Wuming's palm to the surroundings, blowing Merlin's clothes. Godatsi and Matthew were also unable to open their eyes because of the strong wind pressure. In the next second, a beam of light full of magic power, and the size of a huge wild boar that was the incarnation of the Abifu spirit instantly shot towards the Abifu spirit that rushed in front of Wuming. The Abifu spirit was swallowed by the beam of light without any preparation, and without any sound. Then, the beam of light burst into the sky with the movement of Wuming's arm. The beam of light disappeared, the wind pressure disappeared, and Godatsi and Matthew also opened their eyes. The Abifu spirit had already disappeared, leaving only a charred trace that rushed along the ground to the mountain. Walala! Extremely fine sand, stones and soil fell from the sky, which was the debris attracted by the gravity generated by the magic power source. Wait a minute! Was that just a simple magic cannon? Roman's shocked voice came out from Godatsi's wrist again. Magic cannon? Godatsi asked in confusion. It's a magic trick where pure magic is processed, transformed, and strengthened to shoot at the enemy in the form of bullets or cannonballs. It's called magic bullet, and magic cannon can be understood as a luxurious upgraded version of magic bullet. Whether it's strength or range, it's improved by more than a little. Merlin kindly explained. The upgraded version of magic bullets, Assassin, is really powerful. I've only just learned how to release ordinary magic bullets after a long time of practice. Godatsi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. You can't compare with him. Magic cannon has high requirements in fine operation and magic power. The former is fine, but almost no human can meet the latter. Chapter 9:13. Magicians were magicians because they were a group of people who studied magic. It was naturally possible to achieve the former, but the latter was really difficult for magicians. For example, the magic power of the magic cannon that Wuming had just released was almost comparable to the magic power of a large spiritual vein. If ordinary magicians wanted to release such a magic cannon, they would not be able to do it without using some extremely special methods. Senior Villow's magic power is indeed quite sufficient. Matthew remembered that when they were at the American Singularity, Wuming created a fake Holy Grail that simply provided magic power for Wuming. Wuming's magic power was not infinite, but he did not lack magic power. There was no other reason. His magic power capacity was really beyond imagination. If Wuming's body was used as the source of the world, Wuming, who had sufficient magic power, would not have the slightest pressure to support the magic operation of a world. Not only was the amount great, but Wuming's magic power recovery was also extraordinary. However, at this time Roman shouted, "Wait a minute! You're focusing on the wrong thing." The shout was as if he had seen something incredible. My equipment here shows that Henryong did not use a magic cannon, but a pure magic blast that looks like a magic cannon. Roman's words focused everyone's attention on Gadatsi's communication bracelet. Doctor, what do you mean? It did not go through the processing, deformation, and strengthening of the general magic bullet process. He directly compressed the magic power to the extreme and simply released it. Godatsi and Matthew looked at each other, and then at Wuming at the same time. The three of them looked at each other without saying a word, but Wuming could clearly see that Godatsi and Matthew's mouths were slowly opening wide. Hey. Merlin, who had already expected this, covered his ears in advance to prevent his ears from suffering. Ahahaha, although I have never seen Villo's magic power before. Merlin smiled rather relaxedly. But to be able to burn the ground like this, how much magic power must be compressed and released? Matthew had some experience in magic, unlike Godatsi who was a newcomer. Anyway, in Matthew's eyes, it was simply compressed magic power and released it. Without magic modification, it would not be able to create such a scene. Although many servants had the skill mana release, they could not create such a scene that looked like it was bombarded by a supergiant electromagnetic cannon. Mana release was a skill that allowed the user to release the mana stored in their body for a split second. It was a good choice for both damage and movement speed. Moreover, some servants also had obvious magic attributes. In that case, mana release could achieve different effects. For example, take Karna as an example. As a servant, the attribute of his skill mana release was flame. By releasing a large amount of magic power from the soles of his feet in an instant, the flame produced by the magic power could promote Karna to rise, thus achieving the effect of flight. By controlling the magic power intermittently, it could achieve the effect of hovering in the air. That was the advantage of mana release with obvious attributes. Although the ordinary mana release could also achieve this point, the ordinary mana release was indeed not as good as the mana release with the flame attribute. And Wuming's magic power did not have any attributes, it was just pure magic power. However, whether it was magic power with or without attributes, it was extremely difficult to create such a scene in front of Godatsi and others. Mana release, with such a large range, required magic power that not everyone could have. In short, ordinary people and even servants did not have enough magic power. Almost no servant had as much magic power as Wuming, and even the energy in the god's body could not catch up with Wuming. And what was the advantage of having more magic power? It was the unlimited use of magic power, from quantitative change to qualitative change. Only quantitative change can lead to qualitative change, which was understood by everyone, but not everyone could do it. After all, no one could squander their magic power like Wuming. The magic power compressed by Wuming even produced a trace of gravity, which was enough to imagine how huge the base of the magic power compressed by Wuming was. It can be said that if Villo didn't artificially raise the magic power after the compression, I'm afraid half of Abyss Mountain would have been impacted and exploded. Roman made the final statement. I'm going to drink some coffee to relieve my shocked heart. See you later. However, Wuming did not think that drinking coffee would have an effect on relieving heart fatigue. After that, Roman closed the communication channel. Matthew saw that Roman's voice no longer came out of the communication bracelet, so he raised his head and looked at Wuming. Matthew swallowed his saliva to show that he still hadn't recovered from the shock just now. Godatsi was not affected much. By the way, assassin, what will happen if you blow yourself up? Godatsi suddenly asked a question, which also attracted Matthew's attention. The explosion will probably affect the range between here and the Uruk. Abyss Mountain was still some distance away from the Uruk, which was indeed terrifying. At this moment, Wuming's bad taste broke out. Why? Do you want me to try? Wuming looked at Godatsi with a smile on his face. If it's your request, Tachika, it's not that I can't do it. I'll be happy to try it for you. Let's not. Let's go up the mountain. Goddess Ishtar is probably tired of waiting for us. Godatsi immediately waved her hand, but the trace of sweat on her forehead still showed a trace of panic in the girl's heart. You're right. We pretended to think for a moment, then turned around and continued climbing the mountain. When we passed by the scorch marks on the mountain, Godatsi and Matthew couldn't help but take a few more glances. If they were hit by this cannon, It would indeed be terrifying. The two thought of the angry Abiff spirit. It was really pitiful. Then the two rejoiced. Fortunately, when they fired the magic cannon just now, they didn't aim it at the mountain otherwise. I'm sorry, Tachika, Matthew. The mountain path opposite us is broken in half, and we can't use it. Wuming, who was walking in front, suddenly said. Maybe it was affected by the magic cannon. Anyway, we can't use it for a while. Okay, let's pretend that they didn't say anything. Wuming looked at Gadotsi and Matthew, then looked at Merlin, and made a decision in his heart that made Merlin feel a little uneasy. A moment later, Wuming carried Gadotsi and Matthew to the top of the mountain. Is this goddess Ishtar's palace? The first thing that came into Matthew's sight was a building that was different from the surrounding barren land, and it flashed with a hint of gold. But it's just a little. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. What was Gadotsi laughing about? It was none other than Gadotsi laughing at the two large maneki Nico in front of the entrance of Ishtar's palace. Chapter 9:14. Wuming naturally also noticed the large maneki Nico in front of Ishtar's palace. Although it looked funny, it was not as simple as it looked. However, Wuming did not think that it was from Ishtar's memory. After all, there was no such thing as a maneki Nico in Mesopotamia before BC. It was probably the knowledge brought by the girl that Ishtar relied on. After all, the girl lived in the 21st century. By the way, Merlin hasn't come up yet? Wuming did not see Merlin for a long time, and could not help but ask. This. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at each other. They did not know what to say. At this time, a weak voice came into Wuming's ears. Damn it, Pharaoh, you bastard. How dare you make me climb up the cliff by myself? At a certain cliff, a hand so white that it didn't look like a human suddenly reached out and grabbed the ground. Then, a staff was stretched out by the person's other hand, and pierced into the ground to complete the fixation. Finally, the white-haired Big Brother Dream Demon appeared in front of Wuming and the others, looking exhausted. I can't bring 3 people with me, so I have to trouble you. You are also a servant, Merlin. You can't let Tachika and the others climb up here. Wuming comforted Merlin with both reason and emotion. But Matthew is also a servant. However, as soon as Merlin finished this sentence, Wuming stared at him. It was as if he was saying, I'm a girl, are you? Let's go, maybe Ishtar will escape if we stay here for a long time. After Wuming finished, he did not care about Merlin. Gadotsi and Matthew, who wanted to say a few good words for Merlin, went straight to the gate of the temple. It's really unfair. Merlin shrugged his shoulders and complained. He immediately followed Wuming. In fact, Merlin was not as weak as he had imagined. Previously, Merlin had leaped and sprinted through the mountains to find Wuming. This was enough to show how good Merlin's stamina was. Moreover, part of Artoria's swordsmanship was taught by Merlin. Even if such a person claimed to be a magician, who would believe it? By the way, Wuming also learned swordsmanship from Merlin with Artoria, but because the effect was not obvious, it was better to use the spear skills taught by his master, Skahar, so he did not learn much. Walking past the maneki Nico, Wuming thought that the maneki Nico could move, but it kept its maneki Nico posture, and did not move at all. This dispelled Wuming's idea that the 2 maneki Nico were gatekeepers. The 4 continued to go deeper. Because Ishtar's palace was built on the mountain, some parts of the interior were full of darkness. Not only that, the internal structure and the external appearance looked very different. There was no gorgeous look at all. Is this really the palace of the goddess Ishtar? Gadotsi could not help but ask. Obviously, the palace looked so gorgeous from the outside, but the inside was quite disappointing. Because Ishtar has no money. Wuming simply said the truth. This is simple and easy to understand, Tachika. You just need to remember that Ishtar is a loser goddess who loves money and gems, but has no fate with these things. Okay. Gadotsi nodded a little at a loss. After walking for a little while, Matthew saw flashing lights in front of them. Are those torches? It was the light of burning torches. The walls on both sides of the road were inlaid with burning torches, which made the passage look a little more majestic. However, it was only a sliver of. It's almost there. Although Wuming had not been here before, Wuming could feel the divinity of Ishtar. So, their destination was almost there, the main palace where Ishtar lived. Sure enough, after walking through the corridor inlaid with burning torches, the four of them entered a room that looked like a hall. In the middle of the hall, there was a stone pedestal that looked like a throne. Under the stone pedestal were stones that had been trimmed. The stones increased the height of the stone pedestal, which seemed to be deliberately designed. If one wanted to look at the person sitting on the stone pedestal, one had to look up and let the person on the stone pedestal look down on them. It had to be said that this was the work of the gods to make the visitors worship them. Directly above the stone pedestal, there was a big hole in the middle of the ceiling of the main hall. Although it was artificially repaired, it could still be seen that it was violently damaged. Sunlight shone through the big hole like a skylight into the palace, making the originally rather shabby palace look high-end and classy. And the stone pedestal happened to be completely illuminated by the sunlight. Whether it was morning or evening, as long as there was sunlight, the stone pedestal would be illuminated. This design was quite satisfactory. It seems that Ishtar's brain is not as bad as I thought. Wuming looked at the scene and nodded in praise. Of course, who do you think I am? A charming voice came from the shadow of the palace. Then, a beautiful goddess slowly walked out of the shadow and came into everyone's sight. This person was Ishtar, who ran away after being angered by Wuming. I am Ishtar, the mistress of the heavens. This is my palace, Ishtar, so of course I have to be more careful. As Ishtar said, she gently jumped directly onto the stone pedestal and crossed her legs, looking down at Wuming and others below. Goddess Ishtar, your posture is really good. The innocent Matthew couldn't help but complain. He had to admit that this posture was indeed very annoying. Ishtar adhered to her usual style. Even in the state of pseudo-servant, the material on her clothes was still very little. And Ishtar, who was sitting on the raised throne with her legs crossed, in front of Wuming and others, was already in a state of naked state in the future. However, among the four people present, Gadotsi was a woman, and Merlin was a nightmare who didn't understand human feelings. Neither of them would be moved by Ishtar. Only Matthew was too innocent to remind Ishtar. As for Wuming, he was completely used to it. Don't worry about this girl, she didn't care about her clothes at all since a long time ago. It was precisely because the previous Ishtar was extremely thin every day, coupled with Ishtar's bad character, that caused Wuming to have no interest in Ishtar at all. After all, he would get tired of seeing too much. The original Ishtar didn't have the slightest interest in Wuming, let alone the human girl Ishtar. The pseudo-servant state of Ishtar was really far from the original Ishtar in terms of beauty. More importantly, the human girl that Ishtar relied on was someone that Wuming knew. Chapter 9:15. The mentor, who once accidentally led Ilya onto the path of a magical girl, Rin and Osaka. Ishtar's face was exactly the same as Rin and Osaka's face, and similarly, Ishtar also retained Rin and Osaka's slightly regrettable breasts just slightly. But to Wuming's surprise, after Mashu reminded him, Ishtar showed a hint of shyness and embarrassment. He didn't know if it was because of the existence in Ishtar's body, but after Mashu reminded him, Ishtar showed a shy and embarrassed look. Shocked, Ishtar actually blushed out of shyness? But seemingly noticing Wuming's surprise, Ishtar's face suddenly changed, and her slightly red cheeks instantly became normal. In the next second, Tianzhou's horse Anna flew in through the big hole in the ceiling. Ishtar jumped slightly and sat directly on horse Anna, and let horse Anna rise into the air and stay away from Wuming. It could be considered as indirectly preventing her from being exposed. However, Wuming didn't give Ishtar any face. When Ishtar sat on horse Anna and moved, Wuming directly said the truth of his guess. By the way, were you hiding over there just now? Sigh. Wait. No, why would I hide over there? Although Ishtar seemed a little flustered, she immediately pretended to be calm. I thought you didn't dare to see me. In that case, let's get straight to the point. Wuming no longer held back with Ishtar. Come back to Uruk with us, mistress of the heavens Ishtar. The Uruk needs the power of your goddess. Wuming stretched out his right hand to Ishtar, who was flying high in the sky and bathed in the sun, and very simply and violently pulled her to his side. This made Gadazzi, Matthew, and even Merlin dumbfounded. Even Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were monitoring in Chaldea, were taken aback by Wu Ming's sudden invitation. Vilo-senpai, goddess Ishtar wouldn't agree. In the end, Matthew raised a question. Both sides were clearly standing on opposite sides. So why did Wu Ming still ask such a question that would definitely be rejected? Not only Matthew, but Gadazzi also didn't understand. Why wouldn't she agree? Ishtar never said that she wouldn't return to Uruk with us. Everyone was stunned. Carefully recalling Ishtar's words, it seemed that it was indeed as Wu Ming said. Ishtar never said that she wouldn't return to Uruk. She only said that she wouldn't sign a temporary contract with Gadazzi. Ishtar, who was also stunned by Wu Ming's sudden invitation, also recovered at this moment. Ishtar was also surprised by Wu Ming's approach, but after carefully recalling, she really didn't say that she wouldn't return to Uruk. In other words, there was still a chance for things to turn around. Yes, Ishtar was a little happy, but she couldn't help it because Wu Ming was here. Ishtar was indeed hiding just now. She knew that if there were only a few people in Chaldea, Ishtar wouldn't have to care about their expressions at all, and could do whatever she wanted. However, Wu Ming just had to come with her. When she returned to her palace, she heard a loud noise and felt a strong magic power. It was undoubtedly Wu Ming's magic power, and Ishtar always felt that Wu Ming was stronger than before. Ishtar knew that she couldn't beat Wu Ming. Without her father's protection, Ishtar would definitely be hung up and beaten by Wu Ming. In the end, she would be shipped back to Uruk and forced to sign a contract with that human girl. Even worse, Ishtar would be forced to become Gold Twinkle's subordinate and act according to his orders. This was something she didn't want to encounter in any case. However, she couldn't compromise just like that. Sign a contract with a human master, and then go back to work for Gold Twinkle? What a joke. And for some reason, Ishtar felt like she couldn't raise her head in front of Wu Ming. Just like most human beings, like a child meeting their parents, or a student meeting their teacher, Ishtar realized that she had a natural fear of Wu Ming for some reason. That was why when she faced Wu Ming before, no matter how angry she was, Wu Ming lectured her, or when she saw Wu Ming get angry, she was like a deflated balloon. She could only blame it on the aftereffects of being bullied by Wu Ming in the past. That was why Ishtar was thinking when she hid. If she couldn't do it, she would just run away. It had to be said that Wu Ming guessed Ishtar's thoughts. It felt like, the person who knows you best is not your friend but your enemy. Wu Ming was afraid that if they spent too much time on the road, Ishtar would run away after letting her imagination run wild. So Wu Ming directly flew up with Gadazzi and the others. Anyway, it wasn't like Ishtar hadn't done this kind of thing before, and for her it wasn't something to be embarrassed about. From the looks of it, it was also because Wu Ming and the others came a little too quickly that Ishtar didn't have time to run away. She had no choice but to face them with force. Ishtar, I can take a step back. You don't have to sign a contract with our master, and you don't have to be Gil's servant. You only have to cooperate with us to deal with the monsters. This is already the greatest respect we can give to you as a goddess. Since Ishtar refused to sign a temporary contract, Wu Ming would just cancel this condition. As for the content of the second condition, it was even easier to understand. We have already made a big concession. I hope you can consider it. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he didn't say anything else. This made Ishtar a little surprised that Wu Ming would actually give in. According to Ishtar's understanding of Wu Ming, in this kind of situation where the gods disappeared and she did something slightly out of line, Wu Ming should directly attack her. She really couldn't beat Wu Ming, and there was no other way except to run away. However, according to Ishtar's understanding, before Wu Ming and the others came, she could still run away. But now she probably couldn't run away. It was because she couldn't run away that Ishtar forced herself to meet Wu Ming and the others. However, Ishtar didn't expect that Wu Ming would actually choose to take a step back and discuss with her. This made Ishtar, who was originally a little nervous, feel a little proud. It was really just a little and a little. I didn't expect that one day Hyunryong Sama would also bow to me. Very good, very good. As Ishtar spoke, her face revealed a smile that she thought was perfect. However, This smile in front of Gadotsi and the others was like a blooming flower. Then what do you think? Ta. Air. Wuming's entire face darkened, only his red eyes emitting a deeper red light. He had, indeed, taken a step back, but when he saw Ishtar's complacent look, he was still displeased. Ishtar was shocked by Wuming's expression, but at the same time, she understood one thing. Wuming's concession wasn't a compromise. It was just giving her face or giving her a choice. It wasn't giving her a chance to take a yard after taking an inch. Chapter 9:16. Well, since you are begging me, I can consider it. Although Ishtar's tone was quite weak when she said this. I originally wanted to use force against you, but for some reason, I gave up on this idea. Then, Wuming looked back at Merlin. That one is here. As soon as Wuming spoke, Merlin knew what Wuming was talking about. Indeed, they have arrived. Merlin nodded. Then, Merlin turned and walked toward the passage behind him. I will go and block them for a while. You guys discuss as soon as possible. As Merlin spoke, his figure disappeared. Assassin, where did Merlin go? After watching Merlin leave, Gadotsi immediately looked at Wuming. I will keep you in suspense. Wuming smiled at Gadotsi, then looked back at Ishtar flying in the sky. One last thing, I will fight for 1/10 of the treasures in Gil's treasure vault for you as a reward. 1/10. Ishtar was surprised, but the corners of her mouth subconsciously curled up. It was a surprise that came from the bottom of her heart. King Gilgamesh's treasure? Matthew couldn't help but repeat. Gilgamesh is the great king who collected all the treasures in the world. Even 1/10 of the treasures in the treasure vault is priceless. The goddess of beauty, harvest and battle, mistress of the heavens Ishtar. You don't have to listen to the orders of Chaldea's master Tachika or the Uruk king Gilgamesh. You only need to listen to my instructions and fight the monsters with us. I will also fight for 1/10 of the treasures in King Gilgamesh's treasure vault for you as a reward. How about it, can you accept it? Wuming's voice was like magic as it entered Ishtar's ears like a bell. No problem. I accept. Ishtar looked proud as if she had earned a lot. In fact, when Wuming proposed to work together, Ishtar was hesitant to agree. Who would have thought that Wuming would ask for 1/10 of the treasures in Gilgamesh's treasure vault as a reward? This was something that Ishtar didn't expect. If she didn't agree now, what if Wuming went back on his word later? That was 1/10 of the treasures. It was more than enough to renovate this dilapidated temple. He. Ishtar, who was flying in the air, giggled as she fantasized about the treasures in her hands. She didn't notice the parchment in Wuming's hand. Nor did she notice that there were 3 red marks on the back of Wuming's hand that looked like a bow and wings. 1 left wing, 1 right wing, and 1 arrow sandwiched between the left wing and the right wing. This was the pattern on the back of Wuming's hand. Then, the contract has been established. Looking at the contents of the parchment, Wuming showed a triumphant smile. Ishtar. Yes. However, Ishtar, who subconsciously answered Wuming, was stunned. What's going on? Ishtar found that she couldn't control herself and answered Wuming's words, and her body seemed to be affected as well. She couldn't move like a machine waiting for orders. No matter how stupid Ishtar was, she realized that something was wrong at this moment. Coincidentally, Ishtar saw the command seal, flashing with scarlet light on the back of Wuming's hand. That's command seal? How is that possible? Let's not talk about how she became his servant. She clearly had an A-level magic pair. Ishtar's mind was in a mess. Ishtar's A-level magic pair didn't have any effect on Ishtar's magic, and it didn't help her resist the command at all. Ishtar, help Merlin destroy the attacking demonic beasts. Remember, even if you let the demonic beasts escape, you can't let the demonic beast commander escape. You are allowed to use your noble phantoms. Go. The left wing of the command seal on Wuming's hand glowed, and at the same time, Ishtar felt that there was an unimaginable amount of magic in her body. Yes, Ishtar was forced to answer, and she flew out of the big hole in the ceiling with Skyboat Horse Anna. Damn Hyunryong. Just you wait. Ishtar was obviously crying in the end. In the end, Ishtar was bullied by Wuming and cried. That stupid goddess is still so easy to deal with. Wuming looked at the command seal on the back of his hand, and he was in a good mood. That Villo Sr. Matthew was at a loss, and Gadotsi was even more serious. She was shocked. Assassin, what the hell is going on? This sentence contained a lot of questions. For example, why did Wuming have a command seal? Why did Ishtar suddenly sign a master-slave contract with Wuming? Why didn't Ishtar have the slightest ability to resist? One of my powers is to sign a contract with others. I used a word game to successfully make Ishtar sign a contract with me. Wuming's power was one of the 12 incarnations, the dependent incarnation, which had the ability to sign a contract with others and make them his dependent. Although the parchment was similar to the organizer's authority, it was only similar. It was not the organizer's authority, but the proof of Wuming's dependent contract. The organizer's authority could only be used in the world of the box court, and it would lose its effectiveness after leaving the box court. And if it could be used outside the box court, wouldn't it be invincible? As for this, Wuming raised his hand and showed the remaining 2 command seals to Gadotsi and Matthew. This is just a simple magic crystal, not a command seal. Wuming's command and restraint on Ishtar were the influence of the dependent incarnation, not the contract between the master and the servant. The dependent contract was deeply ingrained in one's bones, so Ishtar's magic power would not work at all, even if her magic power was X. The magic crystal was like the house's anti-theft system, and the command seal was like the thief's theft method. The anti-theft system could naturally play a certain role in the thief's theft method. However, the contract between Wuming and Ishtar was the product of Ishtar's consent. It was like Wuming got the key to the house from Ishtar. With the key, Wuming could naturally bypass the anti-theft system and enter Ishtar's house. Ishtar, who signed a word game contract with Wuming, would be directly under Wuming's control and would not have any effect on magic at all. And these 3 command seal marks were just the magic crystals that Wuming used to support Ishtar. It could be said that they had nothing to do with the command seal. And Wuming used such a magic crystal only because Wuming wanted Ishtar to directly use the noble phantasm when her magic was saturated. Boom. Chapter 9:17. The violent explosion shook the entire Abyss Mountain. Bits of stone fell from Ishtar's palace onto Wuming, Gadotsi, and Matthew. What was that sound? Gadotsi and Matthew both looked in the direction of the explosion. It's probably Ishtar releasing her noble phantasm. Through the contract, Wuming could feel the rapid depletion of the mana in Ishtar's body. He guessed that Ishtar had most likely released her noble phantasm. By the way, Senior Villo, how did you know that the demonic beasts would appear here? Matthew was quite puzzled. This was an area with continuous mountains. The demonic beasts would not be able to advance from here. I captured one of the demonic beasts' commanders, Ulidim. Merlin used an illusion to obtain information from Ulidim's mind. We learned that the demonic beasts would advance from the mountainous areas in the southwest, near the Persian Gulf, and the mountainous areas in the northeast. Then Wuming told the 2 of them his plan. The reason why Wuming brought Gadotsi and Matthew here to look for Ishtar was not only to recruit Ishtar, but also one of the reasons why Wuming came here. He had already killed the demonic beast's commander, Ulidim, who was preparing to attack from the mountainous areas in the southwest. In addition, there was the Quetzalcoatl in the south. As for the southwest, Wuming could relax, but there was no one in the mountainous areas in the northeast. So Wuming thought of Ishtar, who was still a lone follower. Not only could he get Ishtar to join them, but he could also deal with the demonic beasts that were advancing from here. It was simply killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The reason why Wuming changed his mind about using force against Ishtar was entirely because Wuming's mental strength had detected a large number of demonic beasts approaching. The reason why Merlin gave Wuming the confirmation of the demonic beast's arrival was that Merlin had already set up a magic spell nearby to detect the demonic beast's attack. When did he set it up? Of course, it was when Wuming brought Gadotsi and Matthew straight to Ishtar's palace. The reason why he did not bring Merlin was partly because Wuming could not bring 3 people with him. Another reason was to let Merlin set up a detection spell. Although Merlin often complained that he would bite his tongue while chanting spells, he was still a magician after all. Naturally, he could do that. Due to the unexpected arrival of the magical beasts, and the fact that Ishtar's matter had not been settled yet, Merlin decided to use his hallucinating spell to stop the magical beasts for now. Therefore, after Wyrm tricked Ishtar into signing the contract, Wyrm immediately sent Ishtar to support Merlin. The reason why he used a magical crystal on Ishtar was so that Ishtar could use her noble phantasm directly. Because Ishtar had killed a Biff Mountain, there was no sign of life at all. There was no need to consider whether it would affect the innocent. Ishtar could use her noble phantasm without any worries. Moreover, even if she could not kill the demonic beast commander, the other mass-produced demonic beasts would definitely be killed. At this time, if they went to support the demonic beast commander, it would most likely be the death anniversary of the demonic beast commander next year. Let's go, Tachika Matthew. It's time to deal with the demonic beast commander. Although the entire northeastern region of Mesopotamia was full of mountains, it was rare that there was a small barren plain between the mountains and the northern wall. There were no obstacles in the south of this small plain, and it could directly connect to the Uruk. However, because there were mountains in the east, north, and west of this plain, it was not included in the range of the northern wall. The northern wall was close to the mountains in the west of this plain. Logically speaking, there was no need to worry about the mountains. After all, demonic beasts could not cross the mountains. However, since the demonic beast commander's raid on the Uruk, Gilgamesh set up a defensive barrier nearby. After all, no one knew if the demonic beast commander had more methods that humans had not seen before. Although the strength of the temporarily designed barrier could not be compared to the northern wall, it was only used to delay time after all. This was a plain. If demonic beasts really crossed the mountains and came here, the soldiers on the defensive wall would be able to see it at a glance. Then, the barrier here would temporarily block the demonic beasts while the soldiers lined up to report to the Uruk. Because this place was not far from the Uruk, it was convenient for them to inform the soldiers or send more soldiers. However, there had never been any traces of demonic beasts here. Perhaps the demonic beasts were really blocked by the mountains. But even so, Gilgamesh would not be careless. It was because of his carelessness against the demonic beast commander that the Uruk was ambushed from the underground that night, and 1/3 of the population was killed or injured. Once a large number of demonic beasts appeared here, the situation would definitely be terrible. After all, this place was very close to the Uruk. If the demonic beasts broke through here, the entire Mesopotamia might be doomed. After all, the demonic beasts that gathered together were not terrible. The terrible thing was that the demonic beasts that broke in would spread out and slaughter the human beings on the land behind the northern wall. Therefore, to be on the safe side, Gilgamesh also sent 2 servants who survived the last beheading operation to this place. On the temporary wall of the defensive wall, a girl wearing a rather revealing ancient Japanese-style armor walked up. A katana was hanging horizontally on her waist, and her long hair was tied into a knot on the left side to form a bun hairstyle. After that, her left ponytail fell to her waist. She looked quite handsome. This person was one of the 2 surviving servants, Ryder. Her real name was Nuwakamaru. As usual, she needed to check the situation of the soldiers and see if there were any demonic beasts attacking. Nuwakamaru-sama, you came to inspect again. The soldiers were accustomed to it. They were quite respectful to the strong person who was summoned by King Gilgamesh. The young girl was agile and strong in martial arts. She was also kind and treated the soldiers equally. Thus, she was deeply respected by the soldiers. Demonic beasts won't come to the mountains, and we are here. You can rest assured. A soldier patted his chest and vowed. Several soldiers next to him also nodded in agreement. In this regard, Nuwakamaru smiled and shook her head. The defeated general only wants to complete the king's order to make up for his mistakes. Naturally, he should take it seriously. Nuwakamaru-sama's words are very true. However, everything is this poor monk's fault. Everything is this poor monk's fault. This poor monk should be punished twice. A monk with a large number of weapons on his back and a katana in his hand followed behind Nuwakamaru. This person was one of the 2 surviving servants, Lancer. His real name was Musasobo Benkei. You're tuning in to the Lee Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.